Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Vincent Kellerman, and I've been a forest ranger for 23 years. People call me Vince. I've seen bears attack campers, watched lightning split trees in half, and pulled more lost hikers out of the woods than I can count. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened in February of 1978. I worked the Dolly Sods area of Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. It's the most remote section we have, 40 miles from the nearest town. Most folks avoid it in winter. Smart folks, anyway. The weather gets mean up there, and mean weather kills people who aren't ready for it. That February, we got hit with the worst blizzard in 50 years. The snow started falling on a Tuesday morning and didn't stop for 3 days. By Thursday, we had 4 feet on the ground and more coming. The temperature dropped to 20 below zero. The wind howled like a living thing. I was holed up in the ranger station with Danny Walsh, a rookie who'd joined us 6 months earlier. Danny was 22, fresh out of college, and eager to prove himself. Good kid. Reminded me of myself when I first started, except I'd already done my time in Vietnam by then. Danny had never seen real trouble. "Think the research team is okay?" Danny asked, looking out at the white wall of snow beyond our windows. I'd been wondering the same thing. Dr. Patricia Goldstein and her team from the university had come up the week before to study how animals survive winter in the wilderness. 3 researchers total: Goldstein, a graduate student named Michael Torres, and the team leader, Dr. James Morrison. They were staying in the old cabin near Beaver Dam Creek, about 5 miles from our station. "They've got food and heat," I said. "Radio's been dead since yesterday, but that's normal in this weather." The radio tower had gone down in the storm. Happened every few years when the ice got heated. Vi enough, we wouldn't be talking to headquarters until the weather cleared and we could get a repair crew up the mountain. Danny paced near the window. Kid had energy to burn and nowhere to put it. "Maybe we should check on them." "In this storm, we'd be lucky to make it 100 yards before the cold killed us." I knew these mountains better than anyone, and I knew when they were trying to kill you. We waited out. That's what the cabin's for. But I was starting to worry, too. The research team had stopped their regular radio check-ins 2 days ago. Could be their radio went dead. Could be they were busy riding out the storm. Could be a lot of things. By Friday morning, the snow had finally stopped, but the cold hung on like a hungry animal. The thermometer outside our station read 22 below. Too cold to be outside for long, but not cold enough to stop us from doing our job. "We're checking on the researchers," I told Danny. "Get your gear." We loaded the snowmobile with emergency supplies and headed out across the frozen landscape. The world looked like another planet, everything buried under smooth white drifts that sparkled in the weak sunlight. Beautiful and deadly at the same time. The 5-mile trip took us 40 minutes, fighting through snow that came up to our knees, even on the snowmobile. When we finally reached the research cabin, I knew something was wrong before we even stopped the engine. The front door was hanging open, not just unlocked, torn completely off its hinges and lying in the snow 10 feet away. The wood around the door frame was splintered and bent outward, like something inside had exploded through it. "Jesus," Danny whispered. I drew my sidearm and approached the cabin. The snow around the door was churned up and mixed with something dark. Blood, maybe, but frozen so hard it looked like rust-colored ice chips. "Stay behind me," I told Danny. Inside the cabin, the heat hit us like a wall. Someone had cranked the wood stove so high that the air shimmered. Had to be 90 degrees in there, maybe more. But that wasn't the strangest part. Dr. Patricia Goldstein was sitting at the kitchen table, perfectly still. At first glance, you might think she'd fallen asleep reading. Her head was resting on her arms, a notebook open in front of her. But when I got closer, I saw the truth. She was frozen solid. Ice crystals covered her hair and clothes. Her skin was blue-white, the color of old snow. When I touched her shoulder, it felt like touching a statue made of ice. "That's impossible," Danny said, his voice shaking. "The stove's going full blast. It's got to be 90 degrees in here." He was right. The thermometer on the wall read 88 degrees, but Goldstein was frozen like she'd been sitting outside in the blizzard for hours. I checked the other rooms. The graduate student, Michael Torres, wasn't anywhere on the main floor. But when I climbed the ladder to the loft, I found him. Torres was hanging from the ceiling beams like a side of beef in a meat locker. His body had been stripped of flesh in long, precise cuts. The meat had been removed so carefully, so methodically, that he looked more like an anatomy lesson than a person. The worst part was his face. His eyes were still open, and they tracked my movement as I climbed into the loft. He was still alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was still alive. Danny took one look and threw up all over the loft floor. Can't say I blamed him. I'd seen some bad things in Vietnam, but nothing like this. "We need to get help," Danny gasped between heaves. I climbed back down and checked the basement. That's where I found Dr. Morrison, the team leader. He was standing upright in the corner, arms at his sides, looking like he was waiting for a bus. But like Goldstein, he was frozen solid. Ice crystals had formed perfect geometric patterns across his clothes and skin, creating designs that looked almost decorative. The impossible thing was that Maury, San's eyes moved too. They followed me as I walked around the basement. His mouth was slightly open, and I could see his breath coming out in little puffs of vapor, even though he was frozen hard as a rock. 3 thermometers hung on the basement walls. They all showed different temperatures, 45 degrees, 73 degrees, and negative 12 degrees, all in the same room, all at the same time. I'd been a ranger for more than 20 years. I'd studied wildlife, weather, and wilderness survival. I knew what was possible and what wasn't. This wasn't possible, but it was happening anyway. Back upstairs, Danny was looking through Goldstein's notebook. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely turn the pages. "Vince, you need to see this." The last entry was dated 3 days ago, written in Goldstein's neat handwriting. Day 4. Something is wrong with the forest. The animals are gone. All of them. Even the insects. Michael heard voices calling from the woods last night, but when we went to look, there was no one there. The voices sounded like people we know, but they were calling from different directions at the same time. James thinks we should leave, but the storm is too bad. The thing came to the door this morning. We didn't let it in, but it stood there for hours, breathing on the windows. Its breath froze the glass from the outside, even though the temperature was only 10 below. I can hear it walking around the cabin now. It sounds hungry. The next entry was in different handwriting, scratchy, desperate. It's inside now. Patricia won't move. She just sits there, frozen. Michael is in the loft, and God help me, I can hear him screaming, but he's not making any sound. The thing is tall, maybe 12 feet. Antlers like a deer, but wrong. Face like a skull. It touched me, and I can't feel my legs anymore. So hungry. God, I'm so hungry. I understand now. He old stories were true. The Seneca knew. They knew why this place was forbidden. The final entry was just one line, written in letters that looked like they'd been carved into the paper. The hunger walks, and we feed it. We should have left then. Should have gotten on that snowmobile and raced back to the station, then hiked out on foot if we had to. Should have done a lot of things. Instead, we stayed to look for clues, to try to understand what had happened. Biggest mistake of my life. Danny was studying the area around the cabin while I went through the researchers' equipment. Their radio was smashed beyond repair. Their vehicle was buried under 6 feet of snow, but looked undamaged. All their cold weather gear was still hanging by the door. "Vince!" Danny's voice came from behind the cabin. "You need to see this!" I found him staring at tracks in the snow. They were huge, 18 inches long and shaped almost like human footprints, but stretched out. The toes were too long, with what looked like claw marks at the tips. The stride was enormous, maybe 6 feet between steps. The tracks circled the cabin dozens of times, like something had been pacing around it for hours. They led off into the woods toward the north, in the direction of the old Seneca burial grounds. "What kind of animal makes tracks like that?" Danny asked. No animal I know of. I knelt down to get a closer look. The tracks were pressed deep into the snow, which meant whatever made them was heavy, very heavy. We're leaving. Now. That's when we heard the voice. Help me! It was faint, coming from the direction of the tracks. Please, someone help me. It sounded like Dr. Morrison, same voice, same tone, but Morrison was in the basement, frozen solid. Help me! The voice called again, from a different direction this time. I'm hurt! I can't move. Now it was coming from our left, maybe 100 yards away. Still Morrison's voice, but pleading, desperate. Danny started toward the sound. He must have gotten away somehow. Maybe he wasn't as frozen as we thought. I grabbed his owl. Morrison's in the basement, dead frozen. That's not him. But it sounds exactly... Help me. This time the voice came from above us. Impossible, since we were standing in an open field. But there it was. Morrison's voice calling from somewhere in the sky. Danny's face went white. What the hell is that thing? Before I could answer, the temperature dropped. Not gradually, like weather changing, but all at once, like someone had opened a door to outer space. My breath came out in thick clouds. The moisture in my nose froze instantly. The trees around us started to crack. Not from wind. There was no wind. They cracked from the cold, splitting down their trunks with sounds like gunshots. Ice formed on everything in seconds. Our clothes, the snowmobile, the cabin roof. And then we saw it. It came out of the tree line about 200 yards away, moving with a strange, loping gait that covered ground faster than anything that size should be able to move. At first glance, it looked almost human, if humans were 12 feet tall and built like scarecrows. But as it got closer, the differences became clear. Its arms hung down past its knees. Its legs were too long, jointed in too many places. Its head was the skull of some enormous deer, complete with a massive rack of antlers that had to span 8 feet across. The thing that scared me most was how quietly it moved. Something that big should make noise, breaking branches, crunching snow, something. But it glided across the landscape like it was floating an inch above the ground. Run, I whispered to Danny. What? Run! We made it to the snowmobile before the thing reached the cabin. I gunned the engine, and we shot across the snow toward the tree line, hoping to lose it in the thick forest. Behind us, I heard a sound like wind through a graveyard. Low, hollow, hungry. The snowmobile's engine was running rough. The extricity cold was affecting the carburetor, making it sputter and backfire. We weren't going to outrun anything like this. I took us deep into the woods, following game trails I'd known for 20 years. The trees were so thick here that the thing would have trouble following us, big as it was. That's what I thought anyway. A tree exploded next to us, splitting apart in a shower of frozen splinters, then another and another. The thing wasn't following the trails. It was making its own path, walking straight through the forest and shattering everything in its way. Danny was looking back over his shoulder. It's gaining on us! I could hear it now, getting closer. That wind-through-bones sound, but louder. And underneath it, something else. Breathing. Deep, hungry breathing that seemed to come from all directions at once. The snowmobile coughed and died. We were 3 miles from the station, on foot in 20 below weather, being hunted by something that shouldn't exist. I grabbed the emergency pack from the snowmobile. Move. Stay close. Watch for hypothermia, and whatever happens, don't stop moving. We started running through the snow, which was like trying to run through wet concrete. Behind us, trees kept exploding as the thing crashed through the forest. It was playing with us, I realized. Something that could walk through trees like they were grass could have caught us easily. It wanted us afraid. We made it to a cave I knew about, an old bear den carved into a hillside about a mile from the station. It wasn't much, but it would hide us from the wind, and maybe from the thing hunting us. Danny was shaking so hard he could barely speak. What was that thing? I don't know. But that wasn't entirely true. I'd heard stories growing up in these mountains. Old stories that my grandfather told, that his grandfather had told him. Stories about the hunger that walks on two legs, that comes in the hardest winters when people are desperate enough to do anything to survive. Wendigo stories. I'd always figured they were just tales to keep kids from wandering off in winter. Ways to explain why people went crazy during bad winters, started seeing things, started craving things they shouldn't crave. Now I wasn't so sure. We huddled in the cave for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Danny had stopped shaking, which worried me. When you stop shaking in extreme cold, it means your body is shutting down. "We have to get to the station," I told him. "You're going into hypothermia." "I'm fine," he said, but his words were slurred. "Actually, I feel pretty good. Warm, even." That was bad. When hypothermia victims start feeling warm, they're usually minutes away from death. I was getting him ready to move when we heard the voice again, but this time, it wasn't Dr. Morrison. "Vince? Danny? Where are you guys?" It was my voice, coming from outside the cave, calling in exactly the tone I'd use if I was looking for someone. Danny started toward the cave entrance. "That's you, isn't it?" I grabbed him. "I'm right here, Danny. That's not me." "Danny, Vince, I can see your tracks." Still my voice, but now it had a hungry edge to it. "I found something about what happened to the research team. You need to see this." Danny looked confused. "But if you're here, then who's—" The voice changed. Now it sounded like Danny's mother, though I'd never met the woman. "Danny, honey, come home. It's time for dinner. I made your favorite." Danny's eyes went wide. "Mom?" The thing was inside his head somehow, finding the voices that would make him want to come out. I'd seen psychological warfare in Vietnam, but nothing like this. "Don't listen," I told him. "It's not real. None of it's real." But Danny was changing. His pupils were getting bigger, and when he breathed, I could see more of his teeth than should be normal. His fingernails looked longer, sharper. "I'm hungry, Vince," he said. "Really hungry. When's the last time we ate?" We'd had breakfast 6 hours ago, but I realized I was getting hungry too. More than hungry. I was thinking about the steaks in the freezer back at the station. Thick, red, juicy steaks. I could almost taste the blood. That's when I understood what was happening. The thing wasn't just hunting us. It was changing us, making us like it. "Fight it," I told Danny. "Whatever you're feeling, fight it." But his face was different now, longer. His jaw stuck out more than it should, and his teeth were definitely sharper. When he looked at me, I saw hunger in his eyes. Not for food, for me. "You'd taste good, Vince," he said in a voice that was getting deeper. "I bet you're tender. All that muscle from working outdoors, but not too tough. I could start with your arms, maybe. Keep you alive as long as possible." I backed toward the cave entrance. Danny was still changing, growing taller, his fingers stretching into claws. The thing outside had been doing this for God knows how long, finding people, changing them, building its pack. "I know where its heart is," Danny said, and for a moment his voice was normal again, like he was fighting whatever was happening to him. "The cave system under Beaver Dam Falls. That's where it keeps its heart. That's how you kill it." Then his face twisted back into that hungry expression. "But I'm not going to let you." I ran. Behind me I heard Danny, or what Danny was becoming, howl like an animal. The sound echoed off the cave walls and seemed to go on forever. I ran through the snow toward the falls, hoping Danny had told me the truth before he completely changed. The cave system he mentioned was real. I'd explored it as a kid before the Park Service put up warning signs. It was dangerous, lots of ice, deep drops, easy to get lost. Perfect place for something like this to hide. The falls were frozen solid, creating a wall of ice 40 feet high. The cave entrance was behind the ice, almost completely hidden. I had to break through with my ranger axe to get inside. The temperature inside the cave was even, colder than outside. so cold that my flashlight beams seemed to freeze in the air. The walls were covered with perfect ice crystals that formed patterns too geometric to be natural. And set into those walls, like exhibits in a museum, were people. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all frozen solid, all perfectly preserved, all still alive. Their eyes followed my light as I walked deeper into the cave. Some of them looked recent, probably hikers who'd gone missing over the years. Others looked older, dressed in clothes from decades past. One section looked like it might be from the 1800s, based on the clothing styles. All of them were aware. All of them were watching me. At the center of the cave, in a chamber the size of a cathedral, I found what I was looking for. The Wendigo's heart sat on a pedestal of ice, black as coal and bigger than a basketball. It pulsed with a cold light that hurt to look at directly, and standing guard over it was the thing that had once been Danny Walsh. He was 12 feet tall now, with antlers growing from his skull and claws like kitchen knives. But he still had Danny's eyes, somewhere deep in that skull face. "You can't kill it, Vince," he said in a voice like winter wind. "It's been here longer than the mountains, longer than the trees. It's part of the cold itself." "Maybe," I said, pulling the thermite grenade from my pack. Last souvenir from my army days. "But cold things shatter when they get hot enough." Danny Thing lunged at me, just as I pulled the pin. The explosion lit up the cave like the sun. The ice heart cracked, then shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound it made was like every window in the world breaking at once. All around me, the preserved people crumbled to dust as the supernatural cold that had kept them alive finally released them. Danny collapsed, his body returning to normal size as he died. For just a moment, before his eyes closed, he looked grateful. The cave started collapsing. I barely made it out before tons of ice and rock came crashing down, sealing the entrance forever. They found me 3 days later, half frozen and delirious, babbling about monsters and cannibals. The rescue team figured I'd hit my head in the cave-in and imagined the whole thing. Post-traumatic stress from Vietnam, they said. Happens to a lot of vets. They never found Danny's body. The cave system was buried too deep, and there were more storms coming. The official report said he'd been killed in an avalanche while we were checking on the research team. The researchers were listed as missing, presumed dead. Their bodies were never recovered either. I kept quiet about what really happened. Who would believe me? I retired 6 months later and moved to Florida. Figured I'd had enough of winter to last a lifetime. But the thing is, I brought something back with me from that cave. Something I didn't realize until it was too late. The hunger. It started small, just thinking about meat more than usual. Then it got stronger. I stopped eating vegetables altogether. Then I stopped cooking the meat. Now I can barely stand to eat anything that isn't raw and bloody. Last week I caught myself looking at my neighbor's dog and wondering what it would taste like. I think the Wendigo's heart wasn't the only way it reproduced. I think just being close to it, breathing the same air, was enough to plant the seed. The hunger is growing stronger every day. Soon, I don't think dog meat is going to be enough. I'm telling this story now, while I still can, while I'm still human enough to be horrified by what I'm becoming. I've made arrangements, a cabin up north, far from any towns, with a furnace that burns hot enough to reduce bone to ash. When the hunger gets too strong to fight, I'll take care of the problem myself. But I wanted people to know the truth about what happened in those mountains, about what's still out there, waiting for the next hard winter, the next group of people desperate enough to do whatever it takes to survive. The Wendigo is dead, but the hunger that created it, that's older than the mountains, older than human civilization, and it's always looking for new hosts. If you ever find yourself in the deep woods during winter, and you start feeling hungrier than you should, hungrier for things you shouldn't want to eat, get out. Get somewhere warm and populated, and don't go back. Because once the hunger takes hold, there's only one way it ends, and you won't like what you become. My name is Franklin Delacroix, and I should have died in Korea 20 years ago. Maybe then none of this would have happened. I've been a ranger in these green mountains for 23 years. Come next spring, They're putting me out to pasture whether I like it or not. 65 is the cutoff, and I'm pushing 58 hard. My knees creak when it rains, and my hands shake until I have my morning drink. But I know these woods better than any man alive. December 1967 hit Vermont like a frozen fist. The blizzard started on a Tuesday and didn't quit for 6 days. 20 below zero, winds howling like banshees, snow piling up past the cabin windows. The radio tower went down on day 3, cutting us off from the outside world completely. I wasn't alone up here. Danny Morse, just 24 years old, fresh out of forestry school. Good kid, eager to learn. I was supposed to be training him to take over my territory. Poor bastard probably wished he'd picked a desk job in Burlington. "Frank, you ever see snow this deep?" Danny asked, staring out at the white wall pressing against our windows. "Once," I said, pouring coffee that was more bourbon than bean. "Chosen Reservoir, 1950. 30 below. Chinese coming at us in waves. Lost half my unit to the cold before we ever fired a shot." Danny nodded like he understood, but he didn't. Nobody does unless they've been there, unless they've felt winter trying to kill them with its bare hands. We were holed up in the main station cabin, built solid with thick logs and a stone chimney that could heat the whole place if you fed it right. But even with the fire roaring, ice formed on the inside of the windows. This wasn't normal Vermont cold. This was something else. The Abenaki called this area something I can't pronounce right. Means the place where the wind walks hungry. White folks just call it Glastonbury Mountain, but they don't know the stories. They don't know about the things that sleep under the snow. My grandfather was half Abenaki. He used to tell me stories about the Wendigo when I was small. Creature made of winter and hunger, tall as a tree, thin as a shadow. He said they slept deep in the mountains, only waking when the world got too warm or too cold, when the balance broke. I never believed those stories, not until that December. "Frank, look at this," Danny called from the radio desk. He'd been trying to raise headquarters for hours. "The weather station's giving readings that don't make sense." I walked over, boots heavy on the wooden floor. The temperature gauge read -37, but that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was that it had been dropping steadily for 3 days, even though the storm was supposed to be moving out. Outside, the wind died suddenly. Complete silence, like the world had stopped breathing. That's when we heard the knocking. 3 slow knocks on the door. Then 3 more. Then 3 more. Danny looked at me, and I looked at Danny. Nobody should have been out there. Nobody could survive in that cold without proper gear, and we hadn't seen another soul for 2 weeks. "Probably a branch falling," I said, but I was already reaching for my rifle. You don't survive Korea by ignoring your instincts. The knocking came again. This time it was faster. Desperate. "Help!" The voice was weak, muffled by the wind. "Please, I'm hurt." Danny jumped up. "Someone's out there. We have to help them." I grabbed his arm. "Wait, something's not right." The voice came again, clearer now. "Frank? Frank Delacroix? It's Jim Caldwell. From the hunting party. Please, I'm hurt bad." I knew Jim Caldwell. Good hunter, sensible man. He and 5 others had come up here a week ago, planning to wait out the storm in the old Turner cabin about 2 miles north. But Jim's ice sounded wrong, too thin, like it was coming from far away. "Jim?" I called through the door. "Where are the others?" They're hurt. Real bad, Frank. I need help, please." Danny was already moving toward the door, but I blocked him. "Jim, what's the first thing I taught you about winter hunting?" Silence. Long, cold silence. Then Jim's voice again, but different now. Hungry. "Let me in, Frank. I'm so hungry. I haven't eaten in days." That's when I knew we were in trouble. I made Danny wait until dawn before we went looking for the hunting party. The storm had blown itself out overnight, leaving the world buried under 4 feet of fresh snow. Everything was white and silent, like the mountain was holding its breath. We strapped on our snowshoes and headed north toward the Turner cabin. The cold bit at our faces, even through the wool masks. My flask helped, But Danny didn't drink, so he suffered more. "You really think that wasn't Jim last night?" Danny asked, his breath making clouds in the air. Jim Caldwell knows better than to travel at night in a blizzard, and he knows the first rule of winter survival. "What's that?" "Never hunt alone. Always stay with your group." The Turner cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by tall pines. As we got closer, I could see something was wrong. The front door hung open, barely attached to its hinges. Snow had blown inside, covering everything in a thin white sheet. "Jesus," Danny whispered. I'd seen plenty of bad things in my time. Soldiers torn apart by Chinese mortars, bears that had gotten into camps. But I'd never seen anything like what we found in that cabin. Jim Caldwell was sitting at the kitchen table, just like nothing was wrong. He still wore his red hunting jacket and wool cap. His rifle leaned against the wall beside him. He was holding a fork in his right hand. He was also dead, and he'd been eating his own fingers. 3 fingers on his left hand were gone, bitten off at the knuckles. Chewed meat and bone fragments were scattered on the plate in front of him. His face was peaceful, almost, but happy, but his eyes were wide open and staring at nothing. Danny threw up in the snow outside. I wished I could join him, but somebody had to think straight. "Danny, come back in here," I called. "I need you to see this." He wiped his mouth and came back inside, trying not to look at Jim. "Frank, what the hell happened here?" I pointed to the claw marks gouged deep into the log walls. They started about 8 feet up and went all the way down to the floor, but they were on the inside of the cabin, not the outside. "Something got in here," I said, "but look at the door. It was torn off from the inside, not the outside." Danny looked around the one-room cabin. "Where are the others?" "Pete Morrison, Bob Fletcher, Ray Stevens, Carl Bennett, Mike Torres. 6 men came up here." I started searching the cabin more carefully. In the back corner, behind the bunk beds, I found Pete Morrison. He was sitting against the wall with his hunting knife in his hand. His jacket was unzipped and his stomach was cut open from chest to belt. He was still alive. Pete, can you hear me?" I knelt down beside him, trying not to look at the mess he'd made of himself. His eyes focused on me slowly. "Frank? That you?" "Yeah, Pete. What happened here?" Pete's voice was weak but clear. "Started 3 days ago. We were playing cards, waiting for the storm to pass. Then Jim started talking about how hungry he was. Said the canned beans weren't enough. Said he needed real meat." "Go on." "Next thing we know, Jim's biting his own hand. Said it tasted good. Said he couldn't stop." Pete's breathing was getting shallow. "Then the whispers started." "What whispers?" "In our ears, telling us we looked delicious, telling us to try just a little bite. It was so hungry, Frank. The voice was so hungry." Pete died while I was holding his hand. Danny found Bob Fletcher in the root cellar. Bob was alive too, barely, sitting in a corner with bits of clothing and bones scattered around him. Ray Stevens was gone. Not missing. Gone. Like he'd been consumed completely. "Bob, what happened to Ray?" asked. Bob looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much. "I ate him," he said simply. "Ray looked so good. The voice told me he'd taste like Christmas dinner. And he did, Frank. He really did." Bob smiled at me, and I could see pieces of flesh stuck between his teeth. That's when I heard Danny screaming outside. I ran out and found him staring at something moving in the tree line. It was Carl Bennett, one of the missing hunters. But Carl was walking wrong, jerky and strange, like a puppet with half its strings cut. "Carl!" Danny called out. "Carl, over here!" Carl turned toward us, and I saw his face. His teeth had been filed to sharp points, and his fingernails had grown long and curved. His eyes were black from edge to edge. "Danny," I said quietly, "get behind me." Carl started walking toward us, faster now. His feet left strange tracks in the snow, not boot prints, but something with claws. "Frank!" Carl called out, and his voice was wrong, like 2 people talking at the same time. Danny looks tender, young meat. I can smell his blood from here. I raised my rifle and put 3 rounds in Carl's chest. He went down hard, but black liquid poured out instead of red blood. The liquid moved like it was alive, spreading across the snow in patterns that hurt to look at. Then something else came out of Carl's body, something tall and thin and impossibly hungry. The thing that crawled out of Carl Bennett was 15 feet tall and skeleton thin. Its skin was gray like old ice, stretched tight over bones that were too long and joints that bent the wrong way. Its fingers ended in claws, and its mouth was full of teeth like broken glass. It looked at me with eyes like black holes and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through dead trees. "Franklin Delacroix," it said. "I remember you. I can taste your dreams. Korea was so cold, wasn't it? So many frozen bodies. You wanted to eat them too, didn't you?" "Run," I whispered to Danny. But Danny wasn't listening. He was staring at the creature with a strange smile on his face. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "Frank, look how beautiful it is." That's when I knew we were all going to die. I grabbed Danny and dragged him back toward our cabin, but he kept looking over his shoulder at the creature. It didn't follow us, just stood there in the clearing, watching us go. "Did you see it, Frank? Did you see how perfect it was?" Danny's voice had that same dreamy quality I'd heard in Pete Morrison's words. "Shut up and keep moving," I growled, but my hands were shaking worse than usual. I needed a drink bad. Back at the station cabin, I barricaded the door and windows while Danny sat at the table staring at nothing. I tried the radio again, but all I got was static. We were on our own. "Frank," Danny said quietly, "I'm getting hungry." I looked at him sharply. He'd eaten a full breakfast just 2 hours ago. "There's canned stew in the pantry," I said. "Not that kind of hungry." Danny's eyes met mine, and I saw something dark swimming behind them. "I keep thinking about how you'd taste. The voice says you'd be tough, but flavorful, like a good steak." I pulled my sidearm and pointed it at Danny. "Fight it, son. Whatever that thing did to you, fight it." Danny blinked, and for a moment he looked like himself again. "Frank, what's happening to me? I can't stop thinking about eating, about meat, fresh meat. It's that creature, that Wendigo. My grandfather told me stories, but I never believed them. Wendigo. Cannibal's curse. In the old stories, people who ate human flesh in the winter turned into monsters. But this one's different. It doesn't just change you, it makes you change yourself." Danny's hands were on the table, and I could see him staring at his own fingers. They looked so gouged. "Ode, Frank, just a little bite wouldn't hurt." I moved closer to the wood stove where I kept my emergency supplies. There was a bottle of grain alcohol for medical emergencies, 90 proof, and mean as a snake. I took a long pull and felt it burn down to my stomach. "The alcohol," I said, more to myself than to Danny. "In Korea, the medics said frostbite couldn't get you if you had enough alcohol in your blood. Maybe that's why the whispers aren't working on me." Danny started to reach for his fingers, and I fired a warning shot into the ceiling. "Don't you dare, son!" He pulled his hands back, but I could see the hunger growing in his eyes. That's when Mike Torres came crawling up to our door. I saw him through the window, dragging himself through the snow on his belly, leaving a red trail behind him. Both his feet were gone, chewed off at the ankles, but he was still alive, still moving. "Let me in," he called weakly. "Please, Frank. I'm hurt." I opened the door carefully, keeping my rifle ready. Mike looked up at me with pain-filled eyes. "The hunger got me," he whispered. "Started with my toes. Just a little nibble, I thought. Then I couldn't stop. Ate my whole feet before I knew what I was doing." I dragged him inside, trying not to look at the stumps where his feet used to be. "Mike, where's the creature now?" "It doesn't have to be anywhere," Mike said. "It's in all of us now, in our heads, whispering, telling us how good we taste." Danny was grinding his teeth, staring at Mike's bloody stumps. "They smell so good," he muttered. "Fresh meat, warm meat." Mike looked at Danny with understanding. You feel it too, don't you, boy? The hunger. It never stops. Even when you're full, you're hungry for more. I took another drink from my bottle. The alcohol was helping, but I could feel something pushing at the edges of my mind. A soft voice telling me that Mike looked tender, that Danny was young and fresh. How do we stop it? I asked Mike. You can't stop hunger, he said sadly. All you can do is feed it or let it eat you alive. That's when something started pounding on the cabin walls. The sound came from all sides at once, heavy impacts that made the whole building shake. But when I looked out the windows, I couldn't see anything in the darkness between the trees. It's playing with us, Mike said, like a cat with mice. The pounding stopped suddenly. Then I heard footsteps on the roof, slow and deliberate. Something was walking back and forth above us, scratching at the wooden shingles. Danny stood up from the table, his eyes completely black now. Frank, he said in that dreamy voice, you smell so good, like bourbon and old leather. I bet you'd taste like Christmas ham. He started walking toward me, pulling his hunting knife from his belt. I shot Danny Morse through the heart. He went down hard, hitting the floor like a sack of grain. Blood spread out from under him in a dark pool. But his eyes stayed open, and he kept smiling at me with those black, hungry eyes. Thank you, he whispered as he died. The hunger's finally gone. Mike Torres looked at me with something like envy. Wish I had a friend brave enough to do that for me, he said. Then the thing on the roof started laughing. The creature came down the chimney like smoke, flowing around the flames without getting burned. It filled the cabin with the smell of frozen meat and old bones. Standing at full height, its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its skin was the color of week-old snow, and frost formed in the air around it with each breath. Franklin Delacroix, it said, and its voice was like wind through a graveyard. You killed your friend. Does that make you feel powerful? Or does it make you hungry? I kept my rifle trained on it, though I knew bullets wouldn't do much good. What are you? I am winter's appetite. I am the hunger that walks between the trees. I am what happens when the world grows too warm and the old balance breaks. Mike Torres tried to crawl away, but the creature picked him up like he weighed nothing. This one has already begun the change. He understands what he is now. Please, Mike whispered. Just make it quick. The creature bit Mike's head off with one snap of its jaws. The sound was like a tree branch breaking. It chewed slowly, thoughtfully. Better, it said. The fear makes the meat sweet. I took another pull from my bottle, trying to keep my hands steady. Why now? Why wake up after all these years? The world is getting warmer, the creature said, stepping closer. The winters are shorter, weaker. I have slept for 2 centuries, but now I must feed to maintain my strength. Soon, there will be no winter at all. Then I will starve, or I will have to change. Change how? I will teach the hunger to every human I touch. They will spread it to others. Soon all will be Wendigo. All will be winter's children. The creature reached out with one clawed hand and touched the wall. The logs cracked from the cold, and ice spread out from its fingers. You interest me, Franklin. The whispers do not work on you as they do on others. Your blood is too bitter with old pain and strong drink. You taste wrong. I raised my rifle. Then you won't mind if I leave. Oh, but I will not let you leave. You see too much. You remember too much, and you will warn others. The creature lunged at me faster than anything that big should move. I got off 2 shots before it hit me, sending me crashing through the cabin door and out into the snow. I rolled and came up running, heading for the dense woods where the trees might slow it down. Behind me, I heard the cabin exploding as the creature came after me. The wind picked up, and snow started falling again. Within minutes, I could barely see 10 feet in any direction, but I could hear the creature following me, breaking through the trees like they were twigs. I ran toward Glastonbury's Peak, where I knew there was an old avalanche slope. If I could get above it, maybe I could bring enough snow down to bury the thing. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. The creature's voice followed me through the storm. You cannot run from winter, Franklin. I am in every snowflake. I am in every frozen breath. My lungs burned in the cold air and my legs felt like lead. But I kept climbing, using my old army training to navigate by feel when I couldn't see. The creature was gaining on me. I could hear it getting closer with every step. At the top of the ridge, I found what I was looking for. A cornice of snow hanging over the avalanche slope, held in place by nothing but luck and gravity. Below it, thousands of tons of loose snow waited to fall. The creature burst out of the tree line behind me, its black eyes reflecting what little light came through the storm. "Nowhere left to run," it said. "Don't need to run," I replied, pulling the last grenade from my old army kit. I'd kept it all these years as a souvenir. Never thought I'd need it again. "What are you doing?" I pulled the pin and threw the grenade right at the creature's feet. Something I learned in Korea. Sometimes you have to bring the mountain down. The explosion shattered the cornice and sent the creature tumbling down into the avalanche zone. A wall of snow followed it down, tons and tons of white death moving faster than a train. The Wendigo's scream was lost in the roar of the avalanche. When the snow finally stopped moving, there was nothing left but silence. They found me 3 days later, half frozen and talking to myself. "Hypothermia," they said. "Mild frostbite on my fingers and toes. I was lucky to be alive." The official report blamed the hunters' deaths on a gas leak in their cabin. Hallucinations from carbon monoxide poisoning, followed by exposure when they tried to leave. Made perfect sense. Nobody wanted to hear the real story. I never went back to the mountains. Took early retirement and moved down to Florida, where it's hot all yet. Our round in winter never comes. Got a little apartment near the beach and tried to forget what I'd seen up there in the snow. But I kept having dreams of something big and hungry, clawing its way up through tons of snow, dreams of black eyes and voices like wind through dead trees. So I started writing it all down. Everything that happened that December, every detail I could remember. Maybe somebody would believe it. Maybe somebody would understand. The newspapers don't talk about it, but the temperatures in Vermont keep getting warmer every year. The snow line moves higher up the mountain. The winters get shorter. I got a letter last month from the new ranger up at Glastonbury. Young kid, probably Danny's age. He said they've been having problems with missing hikers. People going up the mountain and never coming back down. He said the other rangers found something strange in the snow up near the peak. A big hole like something had dug its way out from deep underground. The snow around it was stained black. I threw that letter away, but I can't stop thinking about it. Every night when I go to bed, I can hear something scratching at my window. Probably just tree branches in the wind. That's what I tell myself anyway. But sometimes when the air conditioning is running and the room gets real cold, I hear a voice whispering in my ear. It tells me how good I would taste. It tells me how hungry it is. It tells me that winter is coming, no matter how far south I run. And someday, when the world gets warm enough, it won't need snow to hunt. It will just need hunger. My name is Franklin Delacroix, and I should have died in Korea. But the Wendigo let me live for a reason. It wanted someone to remember, someone to tell the story, someone to warn people about what happens when winter gets too hungry to sleep. The snow is melting everywhere now, and things that have been sleeping for a long time are starting to wake up. God help us all when they get hungry enough to hunt. This diary was found in Franklin Delacroix's apartment in Clearwater, Florida, after his death in 1989. His landlord said he died in his sleep, but the room was freezing cold when they found him, despite the fact that the air conditioning had been broken for weeks. His last words, according to the night nurse at the hospital, were, "Keep the mountains cold." My name is Victoria Holloway, but everyone calls me Vic. I've been a park ranger in the Chattahoochee National Forest for 7 years now, and I need to tell you what really happened in the summer of 1982. The official reports say it was a serial killer who fled to Mexico. That's a lie I helped create to protect people from the truth. The truth is so much worse. I came to these Georgia mountains to escape the violence of Atlanta. After 5 years as a city detective, I was tired of seeing kids shot over drug corners and women beaten to death by boyfriends who got 6 months in county. The forest seemed peaceful, clean, a place where the worst thing that happened was tourists feeding bears or teenagers drinking beer by the lake. Being the first black female ranger in this district wasn't easy. The locals made that clear every chance they got. Old-timers would ask for a real ranger when I showed up at their cabins. Store owners would follow me around like I might steal something, but I had something they couldn't argue with. I was good at my job. 7 years of detective work taught me to see details others missed. I never forgot a face or a fact. That skill saved my life more than once. July 1982 was the hottest summer anyone could remember. The drought had been going on for 3 months. Streams dried up to muddy trickles. Animals came down from the high country looking for water, getting desperate. Bears wandered into campgrounds. Deer stood in people's yards, too weak to run. Even the snakes seemed sluggish in the heat. The mountains felt wrong that summer. Cherokee folks who lived around the forest said so too. Joseph Ridge, an elder who sometimes helped with search and rescue, told me the animals were scared of something besides the heat. "They're avoiding the high ridges," he said. "Something's got them spooked." I should have listened to him. Instead, I was focused on the Buchanan family. They ran moonshine up on Backbone Ridge, had been doing it for 60 years. Usually I left them alone unless they got too obvious about it. Live and let live, you know. But that July morning, everything changed. The call came in at 6:43 a.m. Martha Buchanan, voice shaking so bad I could barely understand her. "Something killed Earl," she kept saying. "Something tore him apart. You got to come up here. Please." I drove my truck as far as the old logging road would take me, then hiked the last 2 miles to their place. The Buchanan homestead sat in a hollow between 2 ridges, hidden from the world by thick hardwood forest. They'd been operating there since the 1920s, and 3 generations had lived in that same weathered cabin. What I found there changed everything I thought I knew about the world. Earl Buchanan had been the family patriarch. 73 years old, tough as old leather, afraid of nothing. I'd met him a few times during my rounds. He always treated me with respect, never mind what some of his neighbors thought about black folks. But what I found in that clearing wasn't Earl anymore. It was pieces of Earl. His upper body was wedged between 2 branches of an oak tree, 15 feet off the ground. His lower half had been thrown so hard it was buried waist deep in the hard clay soil 50 yards away. The force needed to do that. I'd never seen anything like it. Not in 7 years as a cop or 7 years in the forest. The ground around the still was torn up like a battlefield. 20-inch footprints pressed deep into the earth. Not bear tracks. These had the arch and toe spread of something that walked upright. But no human had feet that big or that strong. Martha stood by the cabin, holding a shotgun with shaking hands. Her face was white as paper. "It ain't natural," she whispered when she saw me looking at the tracks. "Earl went out to check the still around midnight. I heard him screaming. Then nothing. I radioed for backup and started documenting the scene. Every detail burned into my memory like always. The metallic smell of blood mixing with the sweet scent of corn mash. Flies buzzing around what was left of Earl. And something else. A wild, musky odor I'd never smelled before. As I worked, I noticed things that didn't make sense. The damage to the still looked deliberate, not random. Copper pipes twisted into specific shapes. Mash barrels arranged in a pattern around the clearing, like someone, or something, was sending a message. By the time the county sheriff arrived with his deputies, I'd filled 3 pages of notes. Sheriff Coleman took one look at the scene and turned green. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "What kind of animal could do this?" That's when Martha spoke up. "Weren't no animal," she said. "Earl got off 2 shots before it got him. I found his rifle with both shells spent. Whatever killed him took those bullets and kept coming. I bagged the rifle and spent shells as evidence. The barrel was still warm when I found it, and there was blood on the stock where Earl had used it as a club. Whatever attacked him, he'd fought hard. But deep down, I knew Martha was right. This wasn't an animal attack. Animals kill for food or territory. They don't arrange their victims' body parts like some kind of sick art project. As the sun set behind the ridges, painting the sky blood red, I stood in that clearing and felt something watching me. The hair on my arms stood up. Every instinct screamed that I should leave, should get in my truck and drive away and never come back. Instead, I promised Martha I'd find out what killed Earl. That promise almost got me killed. But it also led me to a truth older than these mountains, older than the Cherokee who first walked these paths. Some things in this world operate by laws we don't understand, and sometimes those laws demand a price in blood. 3 days after Earl's death, the Buchanans called again. His time. They'd found Billy. Billy was Earl's son, 45 years old, built like a tree stump. He'd been helping run the family operation since he was 16. Strong, smart, careful about not leaving evidence around, the kind of man who could disappear into these woods like smoke if he needed to. I found him hanging on a fence post like a deer hide, skinned from neck to ankles. But he was still alive. The sound Billy made when he saw me. I still hear it sometimes in my dreams. Not quite human anymore, but trying to form words. His eyes tracked my movement as I approached. Whatever had done this to him wanted him to stay conscious, wanted him to suffer. "Billy," I whispered, kneeling beside him. "Billy, can you hear me?" His mouth moved. Blood bubbled between his lips. "Red eyes." The words came out like broken glass. "Walks like man." He died 30 seconds later. I stood there in the morning sun, looking at what was left of Billy Buchanan, and felt something inside me break. In all my years as a cop, I'd never seen cruelty like this. Animals kill to eat. People kill for passion or money or revenge. This was something different. This was torture for the sake of torture. The fence post where Billy hung faced the family cabin. His wife and teenage daughter would have seen him first thing when they stepped outside. That wasn't an accident. I took photos and measurements trying to stay professional, but my hands shook as I worked. The same massive footprints circled the area. The same musky smell hung in the air. And something new, scratch marks on nearby trees, too high for any normal animal to reach. Sheriff Coleman showed up an hour later with the county coroner. Doc Williams had been pronouncing deaths in these mountains for 30 years. Nothing surprised him anymore. But when he saw Billy, his face went pale. "What in God's name did this?" he scared. "Still working on that," I told him. But privately, I was starting to wonder if God had anything to do with what was happening on Backbone Ridge. The Buchanan family huddled in their cabin while we worked the scene. Martha, her daughter-in-law Susan, and Susan's 16-year-old daughter Missy. 3 generations of women watching their men die in ways that didn't make sense. "It's punishment," Martha said when I sat down with them that afternoon, "for what we'd done to this land." "What do you mean?" Martha's eyes were hollow, like she'd aged 20 years in 3 days. "My daddy-in-law, Earl's daddy, he built the first still here in 1923. Chose this spot because there was already cleared ground. Didn't think nothing of it at the time." "Cleared ground?" "Cherokee burial ground," Susan whispered. "We found out later. Old Joe Ridge told us, but we didn't listen. Said we should move the operation, do something to make it right. But the money was good, and we figured dead folks can't hurt nobody." I felt cold fingers walk down my spine. "How many people are buried here?" "Don't know for sure. Joe says it was a winter camp used for hundreds of years. A lot of old bones in this ground." That evening I drove to see Joseph Ridge at his trailer outside Dahlonega. He was waiting for me on his front porch, rocking in an old chair like he knew I was coming. "You found Billy," he said. It wasn't a question. "You know what's doing this?" Joseph was quiet for a long time, staring out at the darkening mountains. Finally he spoke. "Kekla Kudla. That's what my people called it. The angry one. The one who punishes those who disturb the dead." "Come on, Joseph, you don't really believe." "I believe what I've seen," he cut me off, "and what I've heard from elders who saw it before. Kekla Kudla walks on 2 legs like a man, but it's bigger, stronger, has the intelligence to plan, to hunt, and it never forgets a wrong. So why now? The Buchanans have been on that land for 60 years. Joseph's eyes were dark in the growing shadows. Sometimes it is time for the dead to gather their anger, and sometimes, he paused, sometimes it takes the right trigger. This drought, it's drying up the streams, dropping the water table. All that digging and disturbing the Buchanans do for their operation, now they're going deeper, turning up bones that should stay buried. I didn't want to believe him. My detective training said there had to be a logical explanation. A serial killer with unusual strength. Maybe someone on drugs that made them feel no pain. But those footprints, and Billy's description of red eyes. If this thing is real, I said, how do we stop it? Joseph shook his head. You don't stop Kekla Kudla. You appease it, or you get out of its way and hope it moves on when the job is done. What job? Blood debt, he said simply. The Buchanans took from the dead. Now the dead want payment. That night I sat in my cabin and tried to write up a report that made sense. How do you explain to a sheriff and a federal prosecutor that something out of Cherokee legend is systematically butchering a moonshine family? How do you put that in official paperwork? I was still struggling with that question when my radio crackled at 3 a.m. Martha Buchanan's voice, high and terrified. It got Jimmy. Oh God, it got Jimmy too. I grabbed my gear and drove through the darkness toward Backbone Ridge, knowing I was heading into something my training hadn't prepared me for. In my rearview mirror, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, promising rain that wouldn't come. The beast was just getting started. Jimmy Buchanan was Earl's nephew, a quiet man who helped with the family business and kept to himself. I found him at dawn, sitting propped against a tree like he was resting. His scalp had been peeled away so cleanly it looked surgical, but his brain was still working. Can you hear me, Jimmy? I knelt beside him, trying not to look at the gray matter pulsing behind the exposed skull. His eyes focused on me with perfect clarity. Talk to me, he whispered. Spoke Cherokee. Said the blood debt ain't paid yet. What did it look like? 9 feet tall, covered in dark hair, but it walks like a man. Hands like... Jimmy's voice faded. Like a man's hands, but bigger, stronger. It could have killed me quick, but it wanted me to remember, to tell you. Tell me what? Every Buchanan got to pay. Every one. Even the ones who left these mountains. His eyes rolled back, showing white. It can smell our blood from miles away. Distance don't matter. Jimmy died 20 minutes later. I sat in that forest clearing as the sun came up, looking at 3 crime scenes that defied everything I thought I knew about the world. The methodical cruelty, the impossible strength, the intelligence behind each attack. And if Jimmy was right, it wasn't done. I radioed Sheriff Coleman and told him to meet me at the county courthouse. We needed to find every Buchanan descendant and get them somewhere safe. But even as I said it, I wondered if anywhere was really safe from something that could track bloodlines, like a bloodhound tracks scent. The courthouse records went back to 1891. The Buchanan family tree had spread wide over the decades. Earl's brother had moved to Atlanta in the 1960s. His son Tommy was 16, going to high school in Decatur. His daughter Sarah was 19, a sophomore at the University of Georgia in Athens. There were cousins in Tennessee, Alabama, even one who'd moved to California, all connected by blood to the family that built their still on Cherokee bones. I called the Atlanta PD first, asked them to do a welfare check on Tommy Buchanan. The officer who called back sounded shaken. We found him at the high school, he said, hung by his own intestines from the gymnasium rafters. Building was locked up tight. No way in or out that we can find. When? Coroner says sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. But here's the weird part. Kid was supposed to be at his girl. Friend's house 20 miles away. No car, no money for a cab. How'd he get to the school? I already knew the answer. Something had carried him there. The call about Sarah came 2 hours later. Campus police at UGA found her in her dorm room, posed sitting at her desk like she was studying. Her neck had been twisted completely around, but her face wore a peaceful expression. Her roommate had been sleeping 6 feet away and never heard a sound. "We need to get the rest of them," I told Sheriff Coleman. "Round up every Buchanan we can find and put them in protective custody." "On what grounds? We don't even have a suspect." "Then make something up. Public safety, potential serial killer, whatever it takes." But we were already too late. Over the next 2 days, Buchanan started dying across 3 states. Harold in Chattanooga, found in his locked apartment with his chest caved in. Lisa in Birmingham, discovered in her backyard, buried headfirst in her own garden with just her feet showing. Each death was impossible. Each victim had been alone, behind locked doors, in places no human could have reached. And each scene smelled like that same wild, musky odor I'd first noticed at Earl's Still. The media started calling it the Moonshine Murders, linking the victims to their families' illegal business. FBI agents showed up asking questions I couldn't answer. How do you tell federal investigators that something out of Cherokee legend is systematically eliminating an entire bloodline? On the 3rd night, I was working late in my office when Martha Buchanan called. Her voice was steady now, like she'd found some kind of peace. "It's coming for us tonight," she said. "I can feel it. Martha, get your family and come to the ranger station. We can protect you here." "Ain't nowhere to run from this thing. You know that by now." She paused. "But there's something you need to understand. It ain't just killing us. It's teaching us. Showing us what we done was wrong." "What do you mean?" "Every person it's killed, it's done something different. Something that matches how they wronged the dead." Earl disturbed the bones with his digging, so it scattered his bones. Billy sold the whiskey that came from sacred ground, so it skinned him like an animal. Jimmy knew the family history but never spoke up, so it opened his head and made him speak. The line went quiet for a moment. "What are you trying to tell me, Martha?" "It ain't just random killing. It's justice. Old justice, from a time before courts and laws. And it won't stop until every drop of Buchanan blood is paid for. How many of you are left?" "Here on the homestead? Just me, Susan, and little Emma. Susan's girl. She's only 8 years old." Martha's voice broke. "That thing won't care she's just a baby. Blood is blood." I looked out my office window at the dark mountains. Somewhere out there, something ancient and angry was coming to finish what it started. Something that had tracked down and killed 12 people across 4 states without leaving a trace of evidence that would make sense in a courtroom. "I'm coming to get you," I said. "Ranger Holloway," Martha said quietly. "Vic, you've been good to us, better than we deserved. Don't get yourself killed trying to save what can't be saved." But I was already reaching for my gun belt and car keys. Because that's what you do when you're a cop. You run toward the danger, not away from it. Even when the danger is something that shouldn't exist. Even when you know you're probably going to die. The drive to Backbone Ridge took 40 minutes. By the time I reached the old logging road, storm clouds had covered the stars. The air felt electric, like lightning was building somewhere just out of sight. I parked my truck and started hiking up the trail, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Every shadow could hide a 9-foot monster with red eyes and human intelligence. Every sound could be massive feet moving through the underbrush. But the forest was completely silent. No insects, no nightbirds. Even the wind had stopped blowing. It was like every living thing had fled the mountains, leaving me alone with whatever was coming for the last of the Buchanans. I was half a mile from the homestead when I heard the first scream. The screaming came from the Buchanan cabin, high and desperate. I ran through the darkness, branches tearing at my clothes, my flashlight beam jumping wildly ahead of me. By the time I reached the clearing, the screaming had stopped. The silence was worse. The cabin door hung off its hinges, torn from the frame like paper. Deep claw marks gouged the wooden walls. And that smell, wild, musky, ancient, filled the air so thick I could taste it. "Martha!" I called out. "Susan!" No answer. I drew my service weapon and stepped through the destroyed doorway. My flashlight revealed an empty room, furniture overturned, family pictures scattered across the floor. A rocking chair still moved slightly, as if someone had just gotten up. A sound from outside made me freeze. Not quite human, not quite animal. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I backed out of the cabin and swept my light across the clearing. Nothing. But I could feel eyes watching me, studying me, deciding whether I was a threat or just another obstacle to eliminate. "I know you can understand me," I said to the darkness. "I know you speak Cherokee and English. I'm not here to stop you. I just want to help the child." The growling stopped. Then I heard it. A small voice, crying, coming from the root cellar behind the cabin. I found the wooden door torn off its hinges and climbed down into the earth. My flashlight beam found them huddled in the far corner. Martha Buchanan sat with her back against the stone wall, her granddaughter Emma clutched in her arms. Martha's eyes stared at nothing, her mind broken by whatever she'd seen. But Emma was alive, aware, terrified, but unhurt. "Please," the little girl whispered when she saw me, "don't let it get us." "Where's your mother?" asked gently. Emma started crying harder. "It took her. It took Mama and did terrible things. But it left me and Grandma here, like it was saving us for last." I helped them out of the root cellar and tried to radio for backup. Static. The thing had somehow cut our communications, just like it had done to the Atlanta police and campus security. We were completely isolated. "We need to get to my truck," I told them. But Martha wouldn't move. She just sat in the dirt, rocking and humming tunelessly to herself. That's when I saw the footprints leading into the forest, 20-inch tracks pressed deep into the earth. But these were different from the others I'd seen. These were deliberately placed, forming a clear trail. It wanted me to follow. "Stay here," I told Emma. "Hide in the root cellar and don't come out no matter what you hear." "Don't leave us," she begged. "I'll be back," I promised, though I doubted it was true. I followed the trail into the woods, my flashlight the only light in a world gone dark. The tracks led up the ridge, past the ruined still, deeper into territory I'd never explored. Ancient trees pressed close on both sides, their branches forming a canopy so thick no starlight could penetrate. After 20 minutes of climbing, the trail ended at a small clearing, and there, waiting for me, was the thing that had been killing the Buchanans. 9 feet tall, covered in dark hair but walking upright like a man. Massive shoulders and arms that could tear a person in half. But it was the eyes that made me freeze, glowing red in my flashlight beam, filled with an intelligence older and colder than anything I'd ever seen. Kekla, the angry one. "You're not Cherokee," it said in perfect English, its voice like grinding stone. "Why do you protect them?" "Because it's my job. Your job." It moved closer, and I could see the human hands Jimmy had described. Oversized but perfectly formed with fingers that ended in claws. "Your people were brought here in chains. These mountains were stolen from mine. Yet you serve the thieves and murderers who took both our lands." The Buchanans didn't steal anything from me. They stole from the dead, my dead, built their poison factory on the bones of my ancestors, grew rich from desecrated ground. Its red eyes blazed brighter. "And when my people came to them in peace, asked them to move their operation, showed them respect, they laughed, called us ignorant savages." I kept my gun trained on its chest, knowing bullets probably wouldn't stop it. "So you decided to kill them all? Even the children?" Blood calls to blood. The debt must be paid in full. It tilted its massive head, studying me. "But you are different. You show respect. You try to understand." "Then let the girl live. She's 8 years old. She never hurt anyone. She carries their blood, their guilt. She's innocent." Innocence. Kekla laughed, a sound like wind through dead leaves. "Tell me, Ranger, when your people were dragged to this land in chains, Were the children considered innocent? When my people were driven from these mountains, were their children spared? I had no answer for that. The old ways are returning, it continued. Justice without courts or judges. Payment in blood for blood, suffering for suffering. The world is remembering what it forgot. What do you want from me? I want you to choose. It gestured toward the path I'd followed. Go back to the clearing. Take the child and the broken woman. Walk away and never return. Let me finish what was started when the first Buchanan set foot on sacred ground. And if I refuse, then you die with them. Its claws flexed. But know this, the child will die anyway. If not tonight, then tomorrow, or next week, or next year. I can track Buchanan blood across continents and decades. There is nowhere she can hide that I cannot find her. I thought about Emma, hiding in that root cellar, depending on me to save her. I thought about Martha, broken by grief and horror. I thought about all the Buchanans who'd already died. Men, women, teenagers who'd never even seen the still their family operated. There has to be another way, I said. There is. Joseph Ridge stepped out of the darkness behind me. The old Cherokee man moved with surprising quiet for his age. But it requires sacrifice. Kekla growled low in its throat. Elder, you should not have come. These mountains are my responsibility too, Joseph replied calmly. And I won't see more innocent blood spilled because of old mistakes. What are you talking about? I asked. Joseph stepped between me and the creature. The blood debt can be transferred, from the living to the land itself. But someone must accept guardianship of the sacred ground. Someone must promise to protect it always, to ensure the dead are never disturbed again. And if I do that, if I make that promise, then the child lives. The killing stops. Joseph looked at Kekla. But you can never leave these mountains. You become bound to this place, responsible for keeping the old promises. I looked at the monster that had slaughtered 12 people in 4 days, at the old man who offered me a choice between duty and freedom, at the path that led back to a traumatized child who depended on me for survival. What happens to me? You become the guardian, Joseph said simply. First white person, first woman to hold that responsibility. You learn the old ways, work with my people to protect what's sacred. It's not an easy life, but it's a meaningful one. Kekla watched me with those burning red eyes, waiting for my answer. I thought about my life in Atlanta, the violence and corruption I'd fled. I thought about 7 years in these mountains, the peace I'd found among the trees and streams. I thought about a system of justice older than courts and laws, brutal but honest in its simplicity. If I agree, I said, you let me take Emma to safety first. Let me arrange for her care. Agreed, the creature rumbled. I holstered my weapon and looked at Joseph. What do I need to do? The ceremony took place at dawn in the clearing where Earls still had operated for 60 years. Joseph had spent the night preparing, drawing symbols in the earth with cornmeal and tobacco, singing in Cherokee to the rising sun. Emma sat beside Martha on an old log, both wrapped in blankets I'd brought from my truck. The little girl watched everything with wide eyes, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to know her life had changed forever. Kekla stood at the edge of the forest, barely visible in the morning shadows, waiting. The debt transfer requires blood, Joseph explained, offering me a small knife. Just a few drops on the sacred ground, an offering and a promise. I pricked my thumb and let blood fall onto the earth where generations of Cherokee had been buried. The soil seemed to drink it eagerly. I promise to protect this ground, I said, the words feeling ancient and powerful, to keep it safe from those who would disturb the dead, to honor the old ways and the people who came before. The forest went completely still. Even the wind stopped blowing. Then Kekla spoke, its voice carrying across the clearing. It is done. The debt is paid. The guardian is chosen. And just like that, it was gone. Not fading away or disappearing in a flash of light, just suddenly not there anymore, like it had never existed at all. "Is it over?" Emma whispered. "For you, yes," I told her. "But for me, it's just beginning." Joseph helped me arrange for Emma's care. She went to live with distant relatives in North Carolina, not Buchanan's, but her mother's family. People who had no connection to the bloodline that had brought so much death to these mountains. I told her I'd visit when I could, but we both knew it would be rare. My new responsibilities would keep me close to home. Martha recovered slowly. The trauma had broken something in her mind, but she was tougher than anyone expected. She moved to a retirement home in Gainesville, where she spent her days in a rocking chair telling nurses about a granddaughter who was going to grow up to be somebody special. The official report blamed the Buchanan deaths on a serial killer who used the family's moonshine operation to identify victims. Physical evidence was limited due to the remote crime scenes and jurisdictional complications. The suspect was believed to have fled to Mexico, where similar murders had been reported near the border. Nobody questioned it too hard. 12 deaths in 4 days, spread across multiple states, with no witnesses and no meaningful forensic evidence. Sometimes the official explanation is the only one people can accept. I kept my job as a ranger, but my duties expanded. Joseph taught me Cherokee customs, showed me which places in the forest were sacred and why. I learned to recognize the signs of disturbance, the subtle ways the land reacts when something is wrong. The still was dismantled, the ground blessed and replanted with native trees. Within 5 years, you couldn't tell anything had ever been built there. The forest reclaimed its own with surprising speed. I never saw Kekle again, but sometimes I felt it nearby, watching from the tree line when I walked my rounds. A presence that wasn't hostile anymore, just protective, like we were partners in guarding something precious. The years passed. I got older, grayer, more settled in my role as guardian. New rangers came and went, but I stayed. I couldn't leave even if I wanted to. The promise I'd made was binding in ways deeper than law or contract. Emma grew up to be a teacher, married a good man, had children of her own. She sent me cards at Christmas, pictures of her family. Never mentioned what happened at Backbone Ridge, but I could see in her eyes that she remembered, that she understood the price that had been paid for her survival. In 1995, a development company tried to buy land near the old Buchanan homestead. They wanted to build vacation homes, tap into the mountain tourism boom. The paperwork looked good, the money was right, but something about it felt wrong. I hiked up to the sacred ground and knelt where I'd made my promise 13 years earlier. "What do you think?" I asked the empty air. The answer came as a feeling more than words. "Not yet. Maybe never." The development company's permits got tangled in bureaucratic red tape. Environmental surveys found endangered species that needed protection. Cherokee Tribal Council raised historical preservation concerns. Little obstacles that individually meant nothing but together made the project impossible. The land stayed wild. These days, I'm close to retirement age, but I keep putting in the paperwork to extend my service. The Forest Service doesn't mind. I know these mountains better than anyone, and training my replacement would take years. Years they don't want to invest in someone who might transfer to a different district. They don't understand that whoever takes this job will need to be chosen, not assigned. Sometimes hikers ask me about the old stories, Cherokee legends about creatures in the forest, unsolved murders from the 1980s. I tell them what I tell everyone. The mountains hold a lot of history, and most of it is better left buried. But late at night, when I'm alone in my cabin, I think about justice and sacrifice and the price of protecting sacred things. I think about Emma, safe and happy with her family, and Martha, who died peacefully in her sleep 5 years ago. I think about the Buchanans who might still be alive if their ancestors had shown more respect. And I think about Kekle, the angry one, still out there somewhere in the deep forest, still watching, still waiting for someone else to disturb the bones of the dead. The old ways are patient, but they never forget. My name is Victoria Holloway, and I'm the guardian of Backbone Ridge. This is the story I'll never put in an official report, the truth I'll take to my grave. But it's a truth that needs to be remembered because the mountains are full of sacred places and not all of them have guardians. Some debts can only be paid in blood. Some justice operates beyond human law, and some promises once made can never be broken. The forest remembers everything. My name is Mitchell Kowalski. I know what you're thinking when you look at me. Another crazy man telling wild stories about monsters. I've been here 16 years now, and I still see that look in every new doctor's eyes. But Dr. Burke, you asked me to tell you everything from the beginning, so I will. I was 34 in 1973. Had 2 fancy degrees, one in psychology, one in wildlife biology. Spent 11 years as a forest ranger in the Superior National Forest up in Minnesota, right on the Canadian border. Beautiful country up there. Dangerous too, if you don't respect it. See, I wasn't just any ranger. I was special. I studied wolves, how they think, how they act, how they talk to each other. I could copy their sounds, their body language. The other rangers thought I was weird, but it worked. I could get close to wolf packs like nobody else, close enough to count them, study them, watch them hunt. The government was trying to bring wolves back to places they'd been killed off. My job was to prove wolves were safe around people. Ha! Safe. If only I'd known. My research station sat 40 miles from the nearest town. Just me, my equipment, and the wolves. I loved it out there. The quiet, the smell of pine trees, the sound of wolf songs echoing across the lakes at night. October 1973 was different, though. The wolves were acting strange. It was rutting season, time for them to mate and fight and mark their territory. But something felt wrong. They were too close to my station. Too interested in human smells and the sounds they made. God, the sounds were almost like talking. I should have left then, should have called for backup, but I was so sure I could handle anything. I'd been working with wolves for over a decade. What could go wrong? The Ojibwe people who lived in that area had stories, old stories about wendigos, creatures that used to be human but turned into monsters that ate people. French fur trappers from the 1800s told stories, too, about men who turned into wolves under the full moon. I thought they were just legends, ways for people to explain things they didn't understand. I was wrong. So very wrong. 4 graduate students came to help with my research that October. Jennifer Walsh, Robert Martinez, Lisa Chen, and David Park. Good kids, smart. They wanted to learn about wolf behavior, maybe write their own papers. Jennifer was studying animal psychology. Robert loved biology. Lisa wanted to be a vet. David was the photographer, documenting everything we saw. They set up their tents near my cabin. We'd been working together for 2 weeks. Everything seemed normal. The wolves were active, making more noise than usual, but I thought it was just the season. Mating time makes all animals act different. Then Jennifer started having the dreams. She told me about them on October 23rd. Said she dreamed she was running through the forest on 4 legs, could smell things she'd never smelled before, could hear heartbeats from miles away. In the dreams, she was hunting, chasing something small and warm and scared. It felt so real, Dr. Kowalski, she said, like I was really there. And the weird thing is, I liked it. I liked the hunting. I told her it was just stress, new environment, living in the wild, hearing wolves howl every night. The mind plays tricks. But I made a note in my journal, something to watch. Robert started having the dreams too. Then Lisa. Even David. All of them dreaming about running, hunting, tasting blood. All of them saying how good it felt. I should have sent them home right then. Should have called their university and told them to come get their students. But I was curious. As a psychologist, I wanted to understand what was happening. Group hysteria, maybe. Some kind of shared delusion brought on by isolation and wolf sounds. The temperature dropped on October 25th. Snow started falling. The wolves got louder, closer. I could hear them just outside our camp at night, not howling like usual, making sounds I'd never heard before. almost like they were trying to copy human speech. That's when I realized what I'd done. All those months of copying wolf sounds, trying to talk to them in their own language. I thought I was just observing. But wolves are smart, smarter than most people know. They'd been listening to me, learning from me, and somehow they'd learned to talk back. But not in the way I expected, not in sounds or howls or body language. They talked back by changing my students, by making them into something new, something that was part wolf, part human, something hungry. The first full moon of November was coming. I could feel it pulling at something deep inside me, something wild and angry and hungry. I'd been bitten by wolves before during my research. Little nips, nothing serious. But now those old bite marks were starting to itch, starting to burn. I didn't know it yet, but the change had already started, in all of us. Dr. Burke, you're looking at me different now. Not like I'm completely crazy. That's good, because what I'm about to tell you is when things got really bad. November 1st, 1973. I woke up before dawn to Jennifer screaming. Not the kind of scream you hear when someone has a nightmare. The kind you hear when someone's in terrible pain. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to her tent. What I found. Jesus, I still see it every time I close my eyes. Jennifer was on the ground, writhing around like she was having a seizure. But it wasn't a seizure. Her bones were moving under her skin, stretching, growing. Her face was pushing forward, nose getting longer, teeth getting sharper. "Help me," she whispered, but her voice sounded wrong, deeper, rougher. Something's happening to me. Something's wrong. I tried to hold her still, tried to help, but her skin was burning hot, like she had a fever of 110 degrees. Her fingernails were growing, longer, thicker, turning into claws. Her spine was curving, bones popping and cracking as they changed shape. "Kill me," she begged. Her eyes were still human, still Jennifer, but everything else was becoming something else. "Please, Dr. Kowalski, I can feel myself disappearing. Kill me before I'm gone." I couldn't do it. She was my student. I was supposed to protect her, so I just held her hand while her bones broke and reformed, while her jaw stretched out like a wolf's snout, while thick hair started growing all over her body. The worst part was that she stayed awake through all of it, conscious, aware, feeling every bone break, every muscle tear, every piece of herself that was human dying away. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of watching a young woman turn into something that had never existed before. Part human, part wolf, but not really either one. Something new. Something wrong. When it was over, the thing that used to be Jennifer stood up on 2 legs, 7 feet tall, covered in gray fur, still wearing her torn pajamas. She looked at me with yellow eyes that held just a tiny bit of Jennifer's kindness. "Hungry," she said in a voice like gravel. "So hungry." That's when I shot her, right through the heart with my service pistol. She looked surprised as she fell down, like she understood why I had to do it, like she was grateful. I thought it was over. Some rare disease, maybe. Something that only hit Jennifer. I was wrong. I found Robert 2 days later. He'd gone further than Jennifer's change. Much further. He was fully transformed, but still wearing his glasses. Thick black glasses that somehow stayed on his wolf-like face. He was crouched over something in a clearing about half a mile from camp. When he saw me, he stood up. 7.5 feet tall, gray and brown fur, muscles like a bodybuilder, claws like kitchen knives. But still Robert somehow, I could tell by the way he tilted his head when he was thinking. "Dr. Kowalski," he said. His voice was a mix of growls and human words. Hard to understand, but definitely speech. I remember, "You." The thing he'd been crouching over was a deer. But he hadn't killed it with teeth or claws. He'd used tools, rocks shaped into points, sticks sharpened with his claws. The creature that used to be Robert had kept his human intelligence, but gained something else. something that knew how to hunt better than any animal. "I'm so hungry," he said. "All the time now, and the smells. I can smell everything for miles. Your fear, your sweat, your blood." He took a step toward me. I raised my gun. "Robert, you need to stay back. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to." He laughed, actually laughed. "You can't hurt me anymore, Dr. Kowalski. I'm stronger now, faster, better." His yellow eyes focused on me. "And I'm not the only one changing." That's when I heard Lisa screaming in the distance. Not pain screams like Jennifer, hunting screams, predator calls. I ran toward the sound, Robert following behind me. Not chasing me, just following. Like he wanted to see what would happen. I found Lisa in another clearing. She was on all fours, moving like a wolf, but bigger, much bigger. She had cornered David against a tree. David was still human, but barely. His hands were changing, fingers getting longer, nails turning into claws. He was trying to climb the tree, but Lisa kept jumping up and pulling him down. "Lisa!" I shouted. "Stop!" She turned to look at me. Her face was mostly wolf now, but I could still see Lisa's eyes. They were filled with joy, pure animal joy. She was having fun. David hit the ground hard. I could hear his bones break. Lisa moved in for the kill, but I shot her twice in the chest. She yelped like a dog and ran off into the forest. David was hurt bad, both legs broken. But the worst part was his hands. They'd finished changing while I was trying to help him. Sharp claws instead of fingers, thick pads instead of palms. He looked at his new hand, and started crying. "It's happening to me too," he whispered. "I can feel it starting. In my feet now, and my teeth. They hurt so bad." Robert appeared beside me. I spun around with my gun, but he held up his massive hands. "Don't shoot," he growled. "I want to help him." "Help him how?" "Make it faster, less painful." Robert knelt down next to David. "Jennifer suffered because she fought it, but if you don't fight, it's easier." I watched as Robert put one clawed hand on David's forehead. Something passed between them. David stopped crying. His breathing got slower, calmer. "That's better," Robert said softly. "Just let it happen. Don't be afraid." Over the next hour, I watched David change. But this time it was different. Peaceful almost. His bones still broke and reformed, but he seemed to go to sleep first. When he woke up, he was like Robert. Big, strong, covered in fur, but still partly human. "Thank you," David said to Robert. His new voice was rough but grateful. Then they both looked at me, and I realized they could smell something I couldn't yet feel. I was changing too. The change in me started slow. Subtle things at first. Food tasted different. Raw meat smelled amazing. Cooked food made me sick. My hearing got better. I could hear heartbeats from across the room, conversations from other cabins miles away. But the worst part was the hunger. God, the hunger was like nothing I'd ever felt. Not just for food, for the hunt, for the chase, for the moment when prey realizes it can't escape. I tried to fight it, took notes on everything that was happening to me, kept a scientific journal thinking maybe I could figure out how to reverse it, how to cure it. But deep down, I didn't want to be cured. The wild part of me, the part that was growing stronger every day, liked what I was becoming. Robert and David stayed close to the camp. They didn't attack me, but Tim. Hay didn't leave either. Just watched me, waiting for something. Sometimes at night I'd catch them talking to each other in that mix of growls and words, planning something. Lisa came back, on the 4th day. She'd changed even more. Bigger, meaner. And she wasn't alone. She brought 3 other creatures with her, people from a camping family that had been staying about 10 miles south of us. The Henderson family. I remembered checking their camping permit. Mom, Dad, 2 young kids. But they weren't the Hendersons anymore. The parents, John and Mary, had changed just like the students. 7 feet tall, covered in fur, yellow eyes, sharp teeth. But they moved wrong, jerky, like they were fighting the change even after it was complete. The kids, though, Jesus, the kids were the worst thing I'd ever seen. Children who turn into monsters are worse than adults. Adults have morals, rules, things that hold them back even when they become predators. Kids don't. Kids just want what they want, and they want it now. The Henderson children, Tommy, age 8, and Sarah, age 10, had kept their child faces, but everything else was wolf. Small bodies covered in dark fur, tiny hands with razor-sharp claws, baby teeth replaced by fangs. And they were smart, scary smart. They remembered how to open doors, how to use tools, how to set traps. But they used all that human knowledge for hunting, for killing. Lisa had taught them to hunt together. Pack tactics. The parents would drive prey toward the children, who could fit in small spaces, climb trees, hide in shadows. Then the kids would attack from behind while the prey was watching the big adults. "We're family now," Lisa told me. Her voice had gotten better, more human-sounding. "All of us. Pack." I realized then what was happening. This wasn't a disease. It was evolution. The wolves hadn't just infected us. They'd upgraded us, made us into something that could hunt better than wolves or humans alone. And they wanted me to be the leader. "Alpha," Robert growled, bowing his head to me. David did the same. Even the Henderson parents lowered their heads, but not the kids. Tommy and Sarah just stared at me with their bright yellow eyes, challenging me, testing me. "Prove it," little Sarah said in a voice like broken glass. "Prove you're alpha." That night, they brought me a test. A ranger named Bill Morrison who'd come looking for me when I missed my weekly radio check-in. They'd caught him about 5 miles out, knocked him unconscious, dragged him back to camp. Bill was tied up with rope, awake but gagged. His eyes were wide with terror. He'd seen what my students had become, what I was becoming. "Kill him," Tommy said, bouncing up and down with excitement. "Eat him. Show us your pack." I looked at Bill, known him for 6 years, good man. Had a wife and 2 kids back in town. The human part of me wanted to untie him, help him escape, call for help. But the wild part, the part that was getting stronger every hour, wanted to rip his throat out with my teeth. "I won't kill him," I said. Sarah hissed at me, actually hissed like an angry cat. "Then you're not alpha. You're still too human." She was right. I was still fighting the change, still trying to hold on to who I used to be. But that night, looking at Bill's terrified face, I realized something important. I could use my human mind to control the pack, guide them, keep them from killing innocent people. But first, I had to prove I belonged with them. I walked over to Bill and knelt down beside him, whispered in his ear so the pack couldn't hear. "I'm going to untie you. When I do, run. Run as fast as you can toward town. Don't look back. Don't stop. If you make it to your truck, you might survive." Then I stood up and announced to the pack, "We hunt." I cut Bill's ropes. He looked confused for a second, then ran. The pack howled with excitement and chased after him. But I hung back, let them get ahead, gave Bill a head start. He almost made it. Got to within a quarter mile of his truck before Lisa caught him. The pack surrounded him, ready for the kill. That's when I had to make the hardest choice of my life. Let them kill Bill and prove I was their leader. Or save Bill and fight my own pack. I chose something in between. I challenged Lisa for the right to make the kill. Alpha privilege. In wolf packs, the leader always gets first choice of prey. We fought for 20 minutes, her claws against mine, her fangs against mine. She was strong, but I was desperate. I had to win, or Bill would die, and I'd never be able to control the pack. I won by doing something she didn't expect. I used my human intelligence, faked an injury, let her get close, then went for her throat. When it was over, Lisa was dead. The pack accepted me as alpha, and Bill Morrison escaped into the night. But my victory came with a price. Killing Lisa awakened something in me, something that had been sleeping. The moment her blood hit my tongue, I stopped being Dr. Mitchell Kowalski. I became the leader of a pack of monsters, Dr. Burke, I can see you believe me now. The medical tests don't lie, do they? What I am, what I became, it's still in me. Even after 16 years in this place. After I killed Lisa, the pack obeyed me completely. But being alpha of monsters isn't like being alpha of wolves. Wolves hunt to eat. Monsters hunt for fun. I tried to control them, tried to point them toward deer, rabbits, other animals. But they'd tasted human blood. Nothing else satisfied them anymore. The Henderson children were the worst. They'd sneak away at night and attack campers, hikers, anyone they found alone in the woods. I'd find the bodies later, torn apart, partially eaten. The kids would come back with blood on their faces, giggling about how scared their victims had been. Alpha, little Tommy would say. Humans taste better when they're afraid. Fear makes the meat sweet. I wanted to kill them. The human part of me knew they were a danger to everyone. But the alpha part of me protected the pack. Even the evil members. That's when the government got involved. Bill Morrison had made it to town, told everyone what he'd seen. Military trucks started showing up, soldiers with big guns and strange equipment. They set up a base camp about 20 miles from us and started hunting. But they weren't hunting wolves. They were hunting werewolves. I found out later that the government had been tracking cases like ours for decades. Native American reservations reporting Wendigo attacks. Remote areas in Alaska and Canada where entire families disappeared. They called us lycanthrope manifestations in their official reports. We were rare, but not unique. The soldiers had special weapons, silver bullets, UV lights that burned our skin, nets made of blessed silver chain that we couldn't break. They knew exactly what we were and how to fight us. They killed John Henderson first, shot him with a sniper rifle while he was drinking from a stream. The silver bullet exploded inside his chest like a grenade. He died, screaming. Mary Henderson went next. The soldiers used her mate's death to draw her into a trap. She charged their position in broad daylight, crazy with grief. They cut her down with automatic weapons loaded with silver rounds. That left me, Robert, David, and the 2 Henderson children. A pack of 5 monsters being hunted by a team of trained professionals. The kids wanted to attack the soldiers head-on, use their small size and speed to get past the perimeter, kill the humans in their sleep. But I knew that would just get us all killed. We run, I told them, deeper into the forest. Find somewhere they can't follow. No, Sarah screamed. I want to kill them. I want to eat their hearts. She was out of control. Feral. The animal part of her had taken over completely. Tommy was the same way. They'd stopped being children and become something worse. Pure predators with a child's cruelty. I made another hard choice. For the safety of my remaining pack, I did what I should have done weeks earlier. I killed both Henderson children. It wasn't murder, it was mercy. They weren't human anymore, and they never would be again. They were suffering, trapped between 2 natures, able to be neither. Robert and David understood, accepted my decision. But something in them changed after that. They looked at me differently, with fear now, not just respect. If you'll kill children, Robert whispered, what won't you kill? The soldiers found us 3 days later. We were hiding in a cave system near the Canadian border. They used dogs to track our scent, military dogs trained to hunt monsters. The final battle lasted all night. Robert and David fought like heroes, trying to protect their alpha, but silver bullets don't care how strong you are or how fast you move. David died first, shot through the head while trying to distract the soldiers so Robert and I could escape. Robert lasted longer. He'd always been the smart one, even as a monster. Used the cave tunnels to ambush soldiers, pick them off one by one. But there were too many of them. I found his body at dawn, riddled with silver bullets. But he'd taken 8 soldiers with him. Good deaths. Warrior deaths. That left just me. 1 monster against a military squad. I could have kept fighting. Could have killed more soldiers, maybe escaped into Canada. But I was tired. Tired of running. Tired of being a monster. Tired of making choices that destroyed everyone I cared about. So I walked out of the cave with my hands up and surrendered. The commanding officer was Colonel James Mitchell. He'd been hunting things like me for 15 years. Seen dozens of lycanthrope cases across North America. Dr. Kowalski, he said, you're going to come with us quietly, cooperate, and we'll make sure you're treated humanely. Fight, and we'll put you down like a rabid dog. I nodded. What about the others? My pack? All dead. You're the last one. As they loaded me into a military transport truck, Colonel Mitch, L sat down across from me. For what it's worth, Doctor, you did better than most. Usually, alphas lose their humanity completely within a few weeks. You lasted months, saved some lives by controlling your pack. I killed children, I said. You killed monsters that used to be children. There's a difference. The truck drove for hours. When it finally stopped, they'd brought me here. To this psychiatric facility where I've spent the last 16 years. The official story was that a rabid wolf pack killed my students and the Henderson family. I was found in the woods suffering from trauma and exposure, babbling about werewolves. Declared legally insane. Better than the truth, I suppose. Dr. Burke, you've been listening to my story for weeks now. I can see it in your eyes. You believe me. The medical tests prove I'm not completely human anymore. The government files you found prove the military knows creatures like me exist. So now you have to make a choice. Keep me locked up here forever, or help me escape. I know what you're thinking. How can you trust a monster? How do you know I won't kill again if I'm free? The truth is, you don't know. I don't know either. The change is still in me. Will always be in me. On nights when the moon is full, I can feel the pack calling. Not my old pack, they're all dead, but other packs. Other creatures like me living in the deep woods of North America. Sometimes I dream about joining them, running wild through the forests, hunting under the stars, being what I was meant to be instead of pretending to be human. But 16 years in this place has taught me something important. I'm not just a monster. I'm not just a human either. I'm something new, something that can choose. The students I lost, the Henderson family, even the soldiers who died, they're gone because I made bad choices. Tried to control something that couldn't be controlled. Thought I could be both scientist and monster without consequences. If you help me escape, I won't make those mistakes again. I'll go north, into the Canadian wilderness, where there are no people to hurt. Live alone, hunt animals, not humans. Use my remaining humanity to keep the monster in check. It's not much of a life. But it's better than being caged. I see you've already decided. The keys to my restraints are in your hand. You're shaking, but your mind is made up. Thank you, Dr. Burke, for listening, for believing, for giving me a second chance. I promise you this. Whatever I become out there, I'll remember the woman who treated a monster like a human being. Final entry in Dr. Burke's handwriting. Patient Mitchell Kowalski escaped during transport to federal holding facility on April 15, 1989. Official search was called off after 72 hours. Tracks led north toward Canadian border before disappearing in rocky terrain. I have reviewed 16 years of session notes, medical examinations, and classified government files. My professional opinion, patient's account, is factually accurate. Physical evidence supports existence of lycanthropic transformation in human subjects. Some truths are too dangerous for public knowledge. Some stories are too real to be believed. Some monsters choose to be men, and some men choose to be monsters. Dr. Mitchell Kowalski made his choice. I pray it was the right one. I have submitted my resignation from federal service. This case file is being sealed under national security protocols. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Dr. Helen Burke. Final entry, April 30th, 1989. My name is Daniel Rutherford, and I work for the FBI. Most folks think FBI agents chase bank robbers or catch spies. Me? I hunt monsters. Sounds crazy, I know. But after what I saw in the war, after what our government started cooking up in secret labs, nothing seems impossible anymore. They gave me a fancy title, Special Agent in Charge of Unusual Phenomena. What it really means is when something weird happens that regular cops can't handle, they send me. That's how I ended up driving through the North Carolina mountains in August of 1954, sweating through my shirt in the worst heat wave anyone could remember. The radio crackled with static as I wound through the pine forests of Uwharrie. My orders were simple: investigate the livestock deaths near Bladenboro and file a report. Simple, right? I'd been doing this job for 4 years, ever since they pulled me from regular duty after the Roswell incident. See, there are things the government knows that regular people don't, things that would make you sleep with the lights on if you knew the truth. Since 1947, we've been tracking what they call anomalous biological entities, fancy words for creatures that shouldn't exist but do anyway. Most of the time, it's nothing. Bear attacks blamed on monsters, wild dogs killing sheep. People see what they want to see when they're scared, but sometimes, maybe one case in 20, you find something that makes your blood run cold. The file on my passenger seat was thin. 12 head of cattle found dead over 2 weeks. No bite marks, no signs of struggle. Just dead animals drained of every drop of blood. The local sheriff, a man named Bobby Hayes, said he'd never seen anything like it in 30 years of police work. I pulled into Bladenboro just as the sun was setting. It's the kind of small town where everyone knows everyone, where strangers stick out like sore thumbs. The Mai, N Street, had maybe 6 buildings: a general store, a diner, 2 churches, the sheriff's office, and a gas station that looked older than my grandfather. Sheriff Hayes was waiting for me at the diner. He was a big man with gray hair and worried eyes. When I showed him my badge, he just nodded and poured me coffee without asking if I wanted any. "Glad you're here, Agent," he said, sitting across from me in a booth with cracked vinyl seats. "This thing's got the whole county spooked." "Tell me about the cattle," I said. He pulled out a folder stuffed with photos. The images made my stomach turn. Dead cows lying in fields, their skin pale as paper. They looked empty, like someone had sucked all the life right out of them. "No blood anywhere," Hayes said. "Not a drop. Vet says their hearts just stopped, but he can't explain where all the blood went. A cow's got maybe 40 gallons of blood in it. That much blood don't just disappear." I studied the photos. The cattle looked peaceful, like they'd just laid down for a nap and never woke up. No terror in their eyes, no signs of pain. Whatever killed them had done it fast. "Any tracks? Bite marks? Anything unusual at the scenes?" "That's the weird part." Hayes pulled out another photo. It showed strange marks in the dirt. 3 long toes with what looked like claw marks at the tips. "Found these near every kill site. Never seen tracks like these before." The tracks were bigger than a man's hand and showed a walking pattern. Whatever made them walked on 2 legs like a person. But the feet were all wrong. Too long, too narrow. And those claws. "Any witnesses?" "Emma Watson lives about a quarter mile from the Morrison farm. She called in the first cattle death. Says she saw something moving around her property 3 nights ago. Something gray and tall walking through her cornfield. I'll need to talk to her." Hayes nodded, but didn't look happy about it. "Emma's, well, she's getting on in years. Might be seeing things that ain't there. But she's sharp as a tack most days, and she seemed real sure about what she saw." We finished our coffee in silence. Outside, the night was thick and humid. Crickets chirped in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, a dog howled. It was a lonely sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. Hayes drove me to the motel at the edge of town. It was a sad little place with peeling paint and a neon sign that flickered like a dying firefly. As I carried my suitcase to room 7, I could feel eyes watching me from behind curtained windows. Small towns don't like strangers, especially strangers asking questions about dead cattle and strange tracks. I set my gun on the nightstand and tried to sleep, but the heat made it impossible. I lay there thinking about those photos, those impossible tracks, and the way Sheriff Hayes kept looking over his shoulder like something was following him. At 3 a.m, I heard it. A sound like nothing I'd ever heard before, part growl, part hiss, part something else entirely. It came from the woods behind the motel and lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then silence so complete it hurt my ears. I grabbed my gun and went to the window. The parking lot was empty except for my car and the sheriff's patrol unit. Beyond that, the pine trees stood like black soldiers against the night sky. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. But I knew something was out there. Something hungry. I was up before dawn, drinking coffee that tasted like motor oil and studying the case files again. The waitress at the diner, a woman named Sally with kind eyes and nervous hands, kept refilling my cup and glancing toward the windows like she expected something to come crashing through the glass. "You hear about the dead animals?" she asked finally. "That's right. Good. Maybe now folks will stop pretending nothing's wrong." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "My husband Tom works at the Morrison farm. Says Ezekiel Johnson's been acting strange lately, staying up all night, walking his property with a shotgun." Before I could ask more questions, Sheriff Hayes walked in looking like he hadn't slept. His face was pale, and his hands shook as he poured himself coffee. "We got a problem," he said. "Ezekiel Johnson's dead." The Johnson farm sat in a valley between two hills, surrounded by cornfields that rustled in the morning breeze. From the road, everything looked normal. White farmhouse, red barn, chickens pecking in the yard. But as we got closer, I saw the crows. Hundreds of them perched on fence posts and power lines, all facing the same direction. Toward the cornfield behind the house. They didn't make a sound, just watched us with black eyes as we walked past. We found Ezekiel Johnson 40 yards into the corn, lying on his back between two rows. He looked like the cattle, pale, empty, peaceful. But there were two small holes in his neck, perfectly round and about an inch apart. "Jesus," Hayes whispered. "What kind of animal makes holes like that?" I knelt beside the body, trying not to breathe through my nose. Johnson had been a big man, probably 200 pounds. Now he looked like a deflated balloon. His skin was thin as paper, his lips white as bone. "No blood," I said, more to myself than to Hayes. "How's that possible? Man's got maybe 8 pints of blood. Where'd it all go?" I didn't have an answer. The ground around the body was dry as dust. No blood, no signs of struggle. Johnson's shotgun lay beside him, unfired. Whatever killed him had done it before he could defend himself. The tracks were there, pressed into the soft earth between the corn rows. The same 3-toed prints we'd seen at the cattle sites, but clearer now. I could make out details that made my skin crawl. The middle toe was longer than the others, almost like a thumb. The claws at the tips were sharp enough to cut through leather. "These tracks," I said, "they're not from any animal I know." Hayes was backing away from the body, his face green. "We need to call the state police. Maybe the army. This is beyond us." "No." I stood up, my mind racing. "We keep this quiet for now. Last thing we need is panic." But it was already too late for that. By noon, word had spread through town like wildfire. Ezekiel Johnson was dead, drained of blood, just like his cattle. Sally at the diner served lunch to empty tables. The gas station closed early. Parents called their children inside and locked their doors. I spent the afternoon interviewing everyone who knew Johnson. His neighbors said he'd been acting paranoid for weeks, claiming something was stalking his livestock at night. He'd tried to catch it with traps and cameras, but the creature was too smart. It avoided the traps and somehow disabled the cameras without triggering them. "Zeke was a good man," said his neighbor, Tom Morrison. "Fought in the Pacific during the war. Wasn't afraid of much, but the last time I saw him, he looked scared out of his mind." As evening approached, I drove out to Emma Watson's house. She lived alone in a small cottage surrounded by flower gardens that had turned brown in the heat. She was waiting for me on her front porch, a tiny woman in her 70s with steel gray hair and sharp blue eyes. "You're the FBI man," she said before I could introduce myself. "About time someone with sense showed up. I'd like to hear about what you saw 3 nights ago." She gestured to a rocking chair beside hers. "Sit. This might take a while." Emma Watson had been born in these mountains. Her grandfather had known Cherokee who remembered the old stories, the ones about creatures that hunted in the darkness and fed on blood. "They called it the blood drinker," she said. "Said it came from deep underground, from caves where the sun never shines." Most folks thought it was just stories to scare children. But my grandfather, he believed. What did you see, Mrs. Watson? I was having trouble sleep. Tired of the heat, you know. Went to the kitchen for some water around midnight. She pointed toward her cornfield. That's when I saw it. It? Walking through my corn like it owned the place. Tall as a man, but wrong somehow. Moved too smooth, too quiet. Skin looked gray in the moonlight, and it walked on two legs, but not like a person, more like a bird. Taking long steps, head moving back and forth like it was sniffing the air. How long did you watch it? Maybe 2 minutes. Then it stopped and turned toward the house. Looked right at me through the window. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Eyes like yellow lamps, bright as headlights. It knew I was watching. What happened then? It smiled. God help me, that thing smiled at me with a mouthful of teeth. Then it just vanished. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. Like smoke. That night, I sat in my motel room cleaning my pistol and wondering what I was up against. The tracks suggested something reptilian, but no reptile I knew of walked upright or showed that kind of intelligence. The blood draining was impossible unless you believed in vampires, and I'd stopped believing in fairy tales a long time ago. At least, I thought I had. Around midnight, I heard voices outside, men talking in low, urgent tones. I looked through the window and saw Sheriff Hayes with 3 other men, all carrying rifles. They were loading supplies into the back of a pickup truck. I got dressed and went outside. What's going on? Hayes looked embarrassed. Just some of the boys going hunting. Figured we might catch whatever killed Zeke. That's not a good idea. Can't just sit around waiting for someone else to die, said one of the men, a farmer named Carl Banks. My kids are scared to sleep. My wife won't let them outside. I understood their fear, but hunting an unknown creature in the dark was suicide. Give me another. Good day. I'm expecting reinforcements. It was a lie, but it might keep them alive. They left anyway. I watched their taillights disappear into the forest and knew I'd never see them again. Was right. We found their truck the next morning, empty and covered in those 3-toed tracks. The men were scattered through a 1/4 mile of woods, all dead, all drained. Sheriff Hayes lay beside a fallen log with his rifle still in his hands. He'd fired all 6 shots, but there was no blood except what was missing from his body. Whatever we were hunting had killed 4 armed men without taking a scratch. And now it was getting bolder. I called Washington from the sheriff's office that morning, using the secure line they'd given me for emergencies. The voice that answered belonged to my boss, Director Alan Crawford, a man who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. We have a situation, I told him, then explained about the bodies and the impossible blood loss. Sounds like Project Nightshade, he said after a long pause. What's Project Nightshade? Classified above your level, but I'm sending you help. Dr. Heinrich Kruger and a military team. They'll be there by tonight. What kind of help? The kind that knows how to handle things that aren't supposed to exist. The line went dead. I spent the rest of the day trying to keep the town from falling apart. Word about the 4 dead hunters had leaked despite my best efforts, and now families were packing up and leaving. The main street looked like a ghost town, with boarded windows and empty parking spaces. The military convoy arrived just after sunset. 3 black trucks and a mobile laboratory that looked like something from a science fiction movie. The soldiers wore no unit patches or name tags. They set up a perimeter around the town and told everyone to stay indoors after dark. Dr. Kruger was not what I'd expected. He was a small man in his 60s with thick glasses and a German accent that made my skin crawl. I'd fought against men who talked like him in the war, and it didn't sit well with me that now we were on the same side. Agent Rutherford, he said, shaking my hand with fingers that felt like cold fish. I have read your reports. Most interesting. What's Project Nightshade? He smiled, showing teeth too white to be real. An attempt to create the perfect predator. We took genetic material from various sources and combined it with human DNA. The result was unexpected. You created this thing? Not me personally, but my colleagues, yes. The subject escaped from our facility in Georgia 3 months ago. We have been tracking it ever since. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I asked, what exactly are we dealing with? Something that should not exist, yet does. It requires human blood to survive, approximately 1 gallon per day. It is highly intelligent, extremely fast, and virtually invisible to standard detection equipment. How do we kill it? That remains to be seen. The creature has survived multiple attempts at termination. That night, the real hunting began. Kruger's soldiers were professionals who moved through the forest like ghosts. They had night vision equipment, motion sensors, and weapons I didn't recognize. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like we had a chance. The feeling didn't last long. The first patrol went silent at 11:47 p.m. Their radio suddenly cut off in the middle of a routine check-in. When the backup team reached their position, they found empty uniforms and equipment scattered across the forest floor. No blood, no bodies, just clothes and gear, as if the men had simply evaporated. Impossible, Kruger muttered, studying the scene through his thick glasses. But it wasn't impossible. It was just the beginning. Over the next 6 hours, we lost 12 soldiers. The creature was playing with us, taking 1 or 2 men at a time, always staying ahead of our search teams. It seemed to know our movements, before we made them, as if it could read our minds or smell our fear. By dawn, the remaining soldiers were jumpy and talking in whispers. These were trained killers who'd fought in Korea, but they were scared. You could see it in their eyes, the way they checked their weapons every few minutes and kept looking over their shoulders. The creature is learning, Kruger said as we studied a map covered in red X marks showing where we'd found empty uniforms. It observes our tactics and adapts. Most fascinating. Fascinating? I wanted to grab him by the throat. 12 men are dead. Death is the price of knowledge, Agent. We are dealing with evolution in action. I was starting to understand why someone might want to kill this little Nazi scientist. That evening, Emma Watson came to see me at the command post we'd set up in the abandoned diner. She looked older than her years, bent with worry and fear. It came to my house last night, she said. I felt ice in my veins. Are you hurt? No. It didn't try to get in, just stood in my garden looking at the windows, like it was studying the place, planning something. You're not safe there. We can move you to... I ain't leaving. Her voice was firm despite her fear. This is my home. My grandfather's home. If that thing wants me, it'll have to come and take me. I admired her courage, but I also knew she was signing her death warrant. The creature had killed trained soldiers. A 70-year-old woman wouldn't last 10 seconds against it. At least let me post guards. She shook her head. Your soldiers die too easy. That thing picks them off like flies. No, if someone's going to stop this monster, it'll have to be someone who understands these mountains. What do you mean? My grandfather told me stories. Old Cherokee stories about the blood drinker, how they fought it, how they drove it back underground. How? Fire. The old ones used fire and sacred stones, trapped it in a cave and sealed the entrance with burning cedar and prayers. It sounded like superstition, but so far modern weapons and tactics weren't working. Maybe it was time to try the old ways. That night, 3 more soldiers disappeared. We found their gear in a neat pile beside a stream, but no trace of the men themselves. Kruger seemed excited rather than concerned, scribbling notes in a leather journal and making phone calls in German. I was starting to suspect that Dr. Kruger cared more about studying the creature than killing it. Around 3 a.m., I was reviewing patrol reports when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in red light. Through the windows, I could see the perimeter guards running toward the forest, shouting into their radios. Contact! Contact! It's in the wire! I grabbed my rifle and ran outside. The creature was visible for maybe 3 seconds in the glare of a floodlight, a tall, gray shape moving impossibly fast through the trees. It looked like someone had crossed a man with a lizard and taught it to hunt. The soldiers opened fire, muzzle flashes lighting up the night like lightning. I heard the whine of bullets and the crash of breaking branches, but the creature was already gone. It moved like smoke, there one moment and vanished the next. In the sudden silence that followed, we heard something that made my blood freeze. Laughter. High and thin and full of cruel intelligence, echoing through the forest like the call of some ancient predator. It knew we were afraid. It was enjoying our fear. And I realized that all our weapons and training meant nothing against something that had been designed to be the perfect killer. The game was just beginning. 2 days later, we found the cave. It was Emma Watson who led us there, following deer trails her grandfather had shown her as a child. The entrance was hidden behind a curtain of kudzu vines, so well concealed that we'd walked past it a dozen times without noticing. Cherokee used this lace for burials, she said, pulling back the vines to reveal a gap in the rock barely wide enough for a man. My grandfather said the spirits of the dead kept evil things away. Guess they got tired of fighting. The smell hit us first, a mixture of decay and something else, something alien that made my nose burn. Kruger took readings with his instruments and nodded with satisfaction. Strong biological activity. The creature is definitely using this location. I wanted to go in immediately, but Kruger insisted on sending a remote camera first. The device lasted about 10 feet before the video feed cut to static. When we pulled the cable back, we found melted wires and plastic. Acid, Kruger said, examining the remains. The creature has defensive capabilities we did not anticipate. We went in anyway. The cave was bigger than it looked from outside, opening into a series of chambers that stretched deep into the mountain. Our flashlights cut through darkness thick enough to touch, revealing walls covered in what looked like dried blood and something else, a translucent slime that reflected our lights like oil. Nesting material, Kruger whispered. Fascinating. The first chamber was empty except for bones, cow bones, deer bones, and others I didn't want to identify. They'd been cracked open and the marrow sucked out. Whatever lived here didn't waste anything. The second chamber made me sick. It was full of cocoons. Dozens of them hung from the ceiling like giant spider eggs, each one about the size of a sleeping bag. They were made of the same translucent material we'd seen on the walls, and they pulsed gently as if something was breathing inside. Mein Gott, Kruger breathed. It's reproducing. One of the cocoons was different from the others, torn open from the inside, empty. Something had hatched from it recently. The thought of baby versions of the creature running around these mountains made me want to run screaming back to Washington. How many? I asked. Kruger was counting, his face lit up with scientific excitement. 12 intact, specimens. Perhaps more in the deeper chambers. We burn it. We burn it all. No. His voice echoed off the cave walls. These are priceless specimens. We must study them, learn from them. Learn what? How to make more monsters? How to make better ones. I was raising my rifle to put a bullet in his twisted head when we heard it. A sound like steam escaping from a radiator, but somehow organic. It was coming from the deepest part of the cave where our lights couldn't reach. The creature was home. It appeared at the edge of our light like something from a nightmare. 8 feet tall and thin as a rail, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Its head was wrong, too long, with a skull that curved back like a shark's. The eyes were what Emma had described, yellow and bright as car headlights. But it was the mouth that made me understand true fear. When it smiled at us, I saw row after row of needle-sharp teeth, and a tongue that was too long and too thin, like a wet gray snake. Beautiful, Kruger whispered. The perfect fusion of reptilian and mammalian characteristics. The creature cocked its head at the sound of his voice, studying us the way a cat studies a mouse. Then it spoke. You made me, it said in a voice like grinding glass. Father Kruger. I remember your laboratory, your needles, your experiments. Kruger stepped forward, his hands shaking with excitement. You can speak. You have retained human cognitive functions. Remarkable. I have retained everything, Father, including the memory of pain. That's when it moved. I've seen fast before. I've seen soldiers in combat, athletes at their peak, predators in the wild. But nothing had prepared me for the speed of this creature. It covered 30 feet in less than a heartbeat, moving in a blur that my eyes couldn't follow. Its claws raked across Kruger's chest, opening it, him up from throat to belly. Blood sprayed the cave walls as the little scientist fell. But he was still alive, still trying to take notes, even as his life leaked out onto the stone floor. Emptied my rifle at the creature, the shots deafening in the enclosed space. Several bullets hit. I saw them punch through its gray hide, but it didn't slow down. If anything, it seemed to enjoy the pain. Iron hurts, it hissed, but iron does not kill. Nothing kills what was born in laboratories and raised on human blood. It came for me next, those terrible claws reaching for my throat. I threw myself aside, rolling behind a cluster of bones, and the creature's claws sparked against stone where my head had been a second before. I had one grenade left. Emergency use only, they'd told me. This seemed like an emergency. I pulled the pin and rolled it toward the cocoons. "No!" the creature screamed. "My children!" The explosion lit up the cave like the sun, and burning fragments of the nest material rained down like falling stars. The creature's wail of anguish was inhuman, the sound of something losing everything it cared about. When my hearing came back, the cave was silent except for the crackle of flames. The cocoons were gone, reduced to ash and memory. The creature lay motionless near the entrance, its gray body broken and still. I thought it was over. I was wrong. As I knelt beside Kruger's body, searching for his notes, I heard movement behind me. The creature wasn't dead, just playing dead, waiting for me to get close. It rose up like smoke, and I saw that my rifle shots had healed. The gray skin had closed over the bullet holes, leaving only faint scars. "You killed my children," it whispered. "Now I kill you." This time I didn't try to run. There was nowhere to go, and I was tired of being afraid. Instead, I did something the creature didn't expect. I smiled. "Your children are dead," I said. "And now you're the last of your kind. When I kill you, this nightmare ends." It lunged at me, claws extended, mouth open wide enough to bite my head off. But I was ready. I'd been carrying something else besides weapons and ammunition, a flare gun loaded with white phosphorus, the kind that burns underwater and can't be put out. I fired point blank into its open mouth. The creature's scream shook dust from the cave ceiling. White fire erupted from its throat, and the smell of burning flesh filled the air. It stumbled backward, clawing at its face, trying to dig out the burning phosphorus that was eating it from the inside. This time, when it fell, it stayed down. The official report said there'd been a gas leak explosion in an abandoned mine. Tragic accident that killed several government inspectors, including a visiting scientist from Germany. The military cleaned up the bodies and sealed the cave with concrete and steel. The truth was filed in a basement in Washington, stamped with so many classification levels that only 5 people in the government were authorized to read it. I was promoted to head a new division, Special Biological Threats. My job was to track down the other creatures Kruger's people had created, the ones that were still out there in the dark places of America. Because Blydenboro wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I found Kruger's files before the military burned his laboratory. 23 creatures had escaped from various facilities over the past 7 years. Some were vampiric, like the Blydenboro beast. Others were worse. There was something in the Pacific Northwest that could mimic human voices perfectly, luring campers into the deep woods. Rangers in Colorado reported attacks by what they called shadow bears, creatures that looked like grizzlies but cast no shadows and left no tracks. In Florida, something was living in the Everglades and taking fishermen who got too far from shore. All of them were Kruger's children. All of them were hunting. Emma Watson never talked about what she saw in those final days. She moved away from the mountains after the cave was sealed, went to live with her sister in Charlotte. But sometimes she'd call me late at night just to make sure I was still alive, still fighting the good fight. "Are they all gone?" she'd ask. Not yet, I'd tell her, but I'm working on it. The last time she called, she sounded different, scared in a way that had nothing to do with old memories. There's something new, she whispered into the phone. Something worse than what we fought in Bladdenborough. It's learning to be human, learning to blend in. The line went dead before I could ask what she meant. That was 3 months ago. Yesterday I got a report from Charlotte about a series of mysterious deaths. People found in their homes, drained of blood with no signs of struggle. The local police think it's some kind of cult. I know better. I'm driving south tonight, my car loaded with weapons and white phosphorus flares. Because somewhere in Charlotte, something that used to be human is learning to hunt in a new way. And Emma Watson hasn't answered her phone in 2 weeks. The war against Kruger's monsters continues. Every time I think I've found the last one, another surfaces in some remote corner of America. They're patient, these creatures. They can wait decades between kills, hiding in caves and forests and abandoned buildings, growing stronger and smarter with each victim. But I'm patient too. And I have something they don't. The memory of what it felt like to watch innocent people die because of human arrogance and scientific ambition. That memory keeps me going when the nightmares come. When I wake up in cold sweats, remembering yellow eyes and needle teeth and the sound of something inhuman laughing in the darkness. The official files say the Bladdenborough incident was resolved with 0 surviving specimens. That's what Congress needs to believe. That's what the American people need to believe. The truth is that somewhere in the deep places of our country, in caves and swamps and places where civilization hasn't touched, Kruger's children are still out there, still hunting, still waiting, and I'm the only one who knows they exist. My name is Daniel Rutherford, and I hunt monsters. Real ones. The kind that used to be human before government scientists decided to play God. The kind that are still learning to be something worse than human. The war isn't over. It's just getting started. My name is Captain James Keel, but everyone called me Jimmy. I was a forest ranger for 16 years in the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. Before that, I flew planes in the Korean War. These days I spend most of my time alone in the woods talking to my radio and keeping records of everything that happens. The radio is my lifeline. I use old military equipment from the war, the kind that never breaks down. Every day, I talk to the fire tower operators scattered across the forest. We watch for smoke, count visitors, and report anything strange. And believe me, in these woods, strange things happen more than you'd think. It's November 1967, and the weather is all wrong. It should be getting cold by now, but it feels like summer. The leaves are falling too early, and the animals are acting weird. My dog Rex won't even go outside after dark anymore. He just sits by the door and whines. I live alone now. My wife Sarah died 6 months ago from cancer. The doctor said she fought hard, but cancer doesn't care how hard you fight. Now it's just me, my radio, and these endless woods. Sometimes I think I hear her voice in the static between stations, but that's just my mind playing tricks. The job keeps me busy. I manage 12 fire towers from here to Point Pleasant, near the Ohio River. Each tower has a guy who stays up there for days at a time, watching the forest through big windows. They call in every 2 hours, like clockwork. That's how I know something's wrong when they don't call. These forests have stories. The old Cherokee people who lived here first told tales about spirits in the trees and creatures that watch from the shadows. Most people think it's just stories, but I've been out here long enough to know that some stories might be true. The TNT bunkers from World War II are still out here too, hidden in the woods like concrete caves. The military stored explosives there during the war, then just left them empty. Kids dare each other to go inside, but smart people stay away. There's something about those bunkers that feels wrong, like they're holding on to old secrets. My radio crackles to life. It's 8 p.m., time for the evening check-in. Tower 7, this is base. Come in, Carl. Static. Then Carl Matthews' voice comes through, shaky and strange. Base, this is Tower 7. Jimmy, I need to report something. There's something out here. Carl's been working towers for 8 years. He's seen bears, wildcats, even a few mountain lions. Nothing scares Carl Matthews. What kind of something, Carl? It's big, Jimmy, real big. Flying around my tower in circles. Got wings like a bat, but it's standing up like a person. And its eyes. Jesus, Jimmy, its eyes are glowing red like car headlights. I write everything down in my logbook. Date, time, weather, what was reported. I've been keeping these records for years, and they've saved my job more than once when people complained about things they said we missed. How big, Carl? Be specific. 10 feet across, maybe more. It keeps landing on my platform outside, looking through the windows at me. When it spreads its wings, it blocks out the whole sky. And Jimmy, I think it's trying to tell me something. The radio goes quiet for a long time. I can hear Carl breathing hard. Carl, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Jimmy, I've never been so scared in my life. This thing, it's not natural. It's something else entirely. Stay inside, keep your doors locked, and call me every hour. I'm heading out to Tower 9 to check on Rick Bailey. I grab my flashlight, my pistol, and my truck keys. The drive to Tower 9 takes 30 minutes on good roads, but these aren't good roads. They're narrow dirt paths that wind through thick trees, and tonight they feel like theirs. They're closing in on me. When I get to Tower 9, I can see the light in the windows. That's good. Rick's still up there. I climb the metal steps to the top, calling out so I don't scare him. Rick, it's Jimmy. You okay up there? No answer. I climb faster. The door is unlocked, which is strange. Rick always locks his door. I push inside and find Rick sitting at his desk, staring out the big windows into the darkness. He doesn't turn around when I walk in. Rick? He turns slowly and his face is white as paper. His hands are shaking. Jimmy, thank God you're here. It visited me too. The thing with the red eyes. It didn't just look at me. It looked into me. I saw things, Jimmy. Terrible things that are going to happen. What kind of things? A bridge. A big silver bridge full of cars. I saw it fall into the water with all those people inside. And there was a date. December 15th. That's less than a month away. I help Rick pack his things. Whatever's happening out here, it's bigger than one scared tower operator. This is something I need to understand. The next morning, I drive back to Tower 7 to check on Carl Matthews. The climb up seems longer than usual, and when I reach the top, the door is wide open. Carl is lying on the ground outside the tower. He fell 100 feet, but there's something wrong with the way he landed. His body looks like it was placed gently on the ground, not dropped. No broken bones, no blood. But Carl Matthews is dead. The doctor in Point Pleasant scratches his head when he examines Carl's body. Heart attack, he tells me. Pure and simple. But Jimmy, I've never seen anything like it. This man died of fear. His heart just stopped from being too scared. What could frighten someone that badly? I don't have an answer, but I have a feeling I'm going to find out. The radio calls come in every day now. Tower after tower reporting the same thing. A giant creature with glowing red eyes flying through the forest at night. But it's not just flying around randomly. It has a pattern. Mike Torres at Tower 12 calls in days after Carl's death. Jimmy, it's here again, looking right at me through the glass. But this time I can hear it thinking. What do you mean, Mike? It's showing me pictures inside my head, pictures of things that haven't happened yet. A school full of kids, but something's wrong with the air. They can't breathe. And there's a date, November 20th. November 20th is tomorrow. I race to town and find the elementary school. The heating system is leaking gas into the classrooms, but no one notices until I point it out. They evacuate the building just in time. If those kids had stayed in school another hour, they might have died from breathing poison gas. Mike Torres never calls in again. When I climb up to Tower 12, I find him sitting in his chair, staring straight ahead. His eyes are open, but he doesn't respond when I talk to him. The pupils are huge, like he's looking at something too bright to see. The ambulance takes Mike to the hospital, but the doctors say there's nothing physically wrong with him. He just won't wake up. He sits in bed all day, drawing pictures with crayons. The same picture over and over. A silver bridge falling into dark water. I start researching the old records in the town library. The librarian, Mrs. Henderson, helps me find newspaper articles going back 50 years. What I discover makes my blood run cold. The creature has been here before. 1907. Giant bird with glowing eyes seen in the forest. 2 weeks later, a mine explodes, killing 37 men. 1927. Multiple sightings of flying demon near the Ohio River. The next month, spring floods kill 19 people when the river overflows. 1943. Military personnel at the TNT bunkers report winged humanoid on 3 separate nights. A week later, an ammunition accident kills 6 soldiers. Every time someone sees this creature, people die. And it always happens exactly 13 days later. I grab my calendar and count the days since Carl's first sighting. 13 days from now is December 15th, the same date Rick Bailey saw in his vision. December's 15th is the day the Silver Bridge will fall. I know the Silver Bridge well. It connects Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, across the Ohio River. Every day, hundreds of cars cross that bridge. If it falls during rush hour, I try to warn people. The police, the mayor, the state highway department, they all think I'm crazy. A forest ranger claiming that a monster bird predicted a bridge collapse. They suggest I take some time off, maybe see a doctor about stress. But I know what I know. And I know that bridge is going to fall on December 15th at exactly 5:04 p.m. The creature visits me on December 10th. I'm sitting on my porch after dark, listening to the radio chatter from the remaining tower operators. Most of them have quit or asked for transfers. Only 3 are left, and they're all scared. That's when I see it. It drops out of the sky like a shadow with wings, 8 feet tall when it lands, with wings that stretch wider than my truck. The eyes are the worst part. They glow like red-hot coals, but there's intelligence behind them. This thing isn't just an animal. It thinks. It doesn't make a sound, but somehow I can hear it anyway. Not with my ears, but inside my head. It shows me the bridge again, but this time I see more details. A school bus full of kids, Christmas shoppers heading home from work, families driving to visit relatives. 37 people will die when that bridge falls, just like 37 miners died in 1907. The number is important somehow. Why are you showing me this? I ask out loud. The creature tilts its head, studying me like I'm some kind of puzzle. Then it spreads its massive wings and launches into the sky, disappearing into the darkness. I spend the next 5 days trying everything I can think of. I call newspapers, radio stations, even the governor's office. Nobody will listen. A forest ranger with stories about pros. Feces monsters doesn't get taken seriously. On December 14th, I drive to the Silver Bridge and park nearby. I have my radio, my first aid kit, and a prayer that maybe I'm wrong about all of this. But I know I'm not wrong. The creature doesn't lie. It shows the truth about things that are coming, whether we want to see them or not. I just have to figure out why. December 15th, 1967. The day I've been dreading for weeks. I'm parked near the Silver Bridge at 4:30 p.m., watching cars drive across like it's any other day. Rush hour traffic is starting to build up. People heading home from work, kids coming back from Christmas shopping with their parents. Normal people living normal lives, with no idea what's about to happen. My radio crackles. It's Dave Peterson from Tower 3, one of the few operators still working. Jimmy, it's here again, the creature, but something's different this time. What do you mean different? It's not showing me visions of the future. It's showing me the past. All the times it tried to warn people going back hundreds of years. Jimmy, I think it's trying to save them. That hits me like a punch to the stomach. All this time, I thought the creature was predicting disasters. But what if it's trying to prevent them? What if the visions are warnings, not prophecies? 5:00 p.m., 4 minutes left. I grab my radio and switch to the emergency channel that all the police and fire departments monitor. This is Captain James Keel, U.S. Forest Service. I need all units to evacuate the Silver Bridge immediately. Structural failure imminent. This is not a drill. The radio squawks back at me. Forest Service has no authority over bridge safety. Clear this channel immediately. 5:02 p.m. 2 minutes. I get out of my truck and start running toward the bridge, waving my arms and shouting at cars to turn around. Some people slow down, confused, but most just doctor. I've around me. A police officer starts walking my way, probably to arrest me for disturbing the peace. 5:03 p.m. 1 minute. The creature appears above the bridge. It drops from the sky like a falling star, wings spread wide, red eyes blazing. It lands right in the middle of the bridge and spreads its wings as wide as they'll go. Cars slam on their brakes. People start screaming and turning around. 5:04 p.m. The Silver Bridge collapses. But instead of 37 people dying, only 2 cars fall into the water. The creature's appearance scared most of the traffic away just in time. Instead of dozens of deaths, we lose 5 people. Still too many, but not the massacre it could have been. The creature looks at me across the wreckage, its red eyes meeting mine. For just a moment, I understand what it really is. Not a monster or a demon, but a guardian. Something that watches over these mountains and tries to protect the people who live here, even when they won't listen to warnings. Then it spreads its wings and flies away into the growing darkness. The newspapers call it a Christmas miracle that more people didn't die. They say the mass hallucination of a giant bird creature caused panic that actually saved lives. Scientists and government officials spend months trying to explain what so many people saw. But I know what I saw. And I know why the creature has been appearing in these mountains for over a century. Some things are too big and too important to ignore, even when they don't make sense. The Mothman, that's what the newspapers start calling it, isn't trying to scare people. It's trying to save them. The problem is, most people won't listen to warnings from monsters. After the bridge collapse, sightings of the creature become rare. A few people claim to see it flying over the forest at night, but there are no more visions, no more prophecies. Maybe its work here is done, at least for now. I go back to my regular duties, managing the fire towers and keeping my radio logs. But I also start a new project. I collect every story about the Mothman I can find. Every sighting, every warning it tried to give. I write them all down in a special book that I keep locked in my desk. Because someday it might come back. And when it does, maybe people will be ready to listen. The creature gave me one last vision that night after the bridge fell. It showed me other places, other times, other disasters that could be prevented if people paid attention to the warnings. Floods, fires, earthquakes, plane crashes, all of them preceded by sightings of red glowing eyes in the darkness. The Mothman isn't just West Virginia's problem. It's everywhere, trying to save people who don't want to be saved by something that looks like their worst nightmare. But sometimes the things that scare us the most are trying to help us the most. 3 months after the Silver Bridge collapse, I get a call I never expected. It's from Dr. Susan Chen, a scientist at the University of West Virginia who studies what she calls cryptid phenomena. Basically, monsters that people report seeing. She's heard about my records and wants to interview me. Captain Keel, I've been tracking similar sightings across multiple states for the past 10 years. Your documentation is the most detailed I've ever seen. Would you be willing to share your findings? I agree to meet her at a diner in Point Pleasant. Dr. Chen turns out to be a small woman with thick glasses and a briefcase full of files. She spreads photographs and newspaper clippings across our table like evidence in a court case. Look at these patterns, she says, pointing to dates and locations marked on a map. Every major disaster in Appalachian history was preceded by sightings of winged humanoids with glowing eyes. But here's what's interesting. The disasters that happened after sightings were always smaller than they could have been. She shows me records from coal mine accidents, train derailments, and dam failures going back to the 1800s. In every case, witnesses reported seeing the creature beforehand. And in every case, something happened to limit the casualties. It's like it's trying to minimize damage, Dr. Chen continues. But it can only do so much. It can warn people, scare them away from danger zones, but it can't stop disasters entirely. Physics is physics. So what is it, I ask? I have a theory. What if it's not one creature, but many? What if there's an entire species that evolved alongside humans, developing the ability to sense disasters before they happen? They try to warn us, but we see them as monsters because they don't look like us. It makes sense in a way that scares me. We've been sharing these mountains with something intelligent for thousands of years, and we never knew it. Dr. Chen and I spend the next 6 months collaborating on a research project. We interview dozens of witnesses, document hundreds of sightings, and map patterns of creature appearances versus disaster occurrences. The data is overwhelming. The Mothman and creatures like it have been trying to save human lives for centuries. But our research comes to an abrupt end in June 1968. I'm working late in my cabin when the radio starts picking up strange signals. Not voices, but patterns of static that almost sound like Morse code. I grab my logbook and start writing down the patterns. The message, when I finally decode it, is simple. Goodbye, Jimmy. I look up from my radio and see glowing red eyes watching me through the window. The creature is perched on my porch railing, wings folded, studying me with what I can only describe as sadness. It projects one final vision into my mind, not of disasters this time, but of gratitude. It shows me all the people who lived because someone finally understood its warnings. The families who didn't lose loved ones on the Silver Bridge, the children who didn't die from gas poisoning at the school. Then it spreads its wings and flies away toward the deeper mountains, where humans rarely go. I never see the Mothman again after that night. Neither do any of the other witnesses Dr. Chen and I interviewed. It's like the creatures decided their work in this area was done, at least for now. Dr. Chen publishes our research in a scientific journal, but it gets buried under academic skepticism. Most scientists refuse to believe in monster birds that predict the future. The few who take it seriously can't get funding for further studies. But I keep my records. Every sighting, every warning, every disaster that was prevented or reduced because someone paid attention to a creature that looked like it came from nightmares. Because I know it will be back someday. Maybe not in West Virginia, maybe not in my lifetime, but somewhere, somewhen, people will start seeing glowing red eyes in the darkness again. And when that happens, I hope they remember that monsters aren't always the enemy. Sometimes, they're the only thing standing between us and much worse disasters. 20 years later, I'm retired from the Forest Service, but still living in the same cabin in the Monongahela. My hair is gray now, my hands shake a little when I write, but my memory is still sharp. And I still keep my radio on every night, just in case. Dr. Chen visits me once a year to update our files. She's tracked Mothman sightings to 12 different states, always appearing before major disasters, always trying to warn people who won't listen to warnings from creatures that look like demons. It's evolved, she tells me during her latest visit. The newer sightings describe creatures that are more human-like, less frightening. Maybe they're learning that we respond better to warnings that don't scare us to death. She shows me recent photographs from Ohio, Kentucky, and Virginia. The creatures in these pictures still have the glowing red eyes and massive wings, but their faces are more human, their postures less threatening, like they're adapting to work better with us. What happened to the original one, I ask? The one we saw here in '67? I think it taught the others what it learned from you, Jimmy, that humans can be reasoned with if you find the right human. Someone who cares more about saving lives than about looking crazy. That night, after Dr. Chen leaves, I sit on my porch with a cup of coffee and think about all the years that have passed. The bridge collapse that could have killed dozens, the school gas leak that could have poisoned children, the mine accidents and floods and fires that were prevented because someone, somewhere, listened to a monster's warning. My radio crackles to life around midnight. It's not one of the tower operators. I don't manage the towers anymore. It's a voice I don't recognize, young and scared. This is Park Ranger Jennifer Walsh at Natural Bridge State Park in Kentucky. Is anyone out there? I need to report something unusual. I pick up the microphone. This is Jimmy Keel in West Virginia. Go ahead, Jennifer. Sir, I know this sounds crazy, but there's a creature outside my station. It's about 8 feet tall with wings and glowing red eyes. And I think it's trying to show me something. A vision of a school bus accident on Highway 27. Tomorrow at 3:15 p.m. I smile in the darkness. A new ranger, a new guardian, a new chance to save lives. Jennifer, listen to me very carefully. Write down everything you're seeing, every detail, every time, every location. Then call the highway department first thing in the morning and tell them to check for road hazards on Highway 27. You believe me? I believe you. And I'm going to help you understand what you're dealing with. There's nothing to be afraid of, Jennifer. You've been chosen for something important. Over the next few hours, I tell Jennifer Walsh everything I learned about the Mothman during those terrifying months in 1967. How to interpret the visions, how to convince authorities to take action, how to work with a creature that's trying to save human lives despite looking like humanity. His worst nightmare. The school bus accident on Highway 27 is prevented the next day when highway crews find a washed-out section of road that would have collapsed under the bus's weight. 23 children live because a monster warned a park ranger who was smart enough to listen. Dr. Chen calls me a week later, excited. Jimmy, we're getting reports from all over Appalachia. Rangers, hikers, even some police officers are having contact with the creatures. But instead of random encounters, it looks like they're choosing specific people. People in positions to help prevent disasters. They're recruiting, I realize. Building a network of humans who can act on their warnings. Exactly. And you're the template, Jimmy. You're the first human who proved we could work together with them. I spend my final years training other people who have been contacted by the creatures. Rangers, emergency workers, scientists, anyone who's seen the glowing red eyes and lived to tell about it. We form an unofficial network, sharing information and coordinating responses to the warnings we receive. The Mothman sightings continue, but they're different now. Less terrifying, more purposeful. The creatures have learned to work with us instead of just scaring us into compliance. Disasters still happen. You can't prevent everything, but the casualties are always lower than they could have been. A coal mine collapse that kills 5 instead of 50. A flood that forces evacuations instead of drowning families in their sleep. A chemical plant explosion that happens during a shift change instead of peak production hours. The creatures can't stop disasters, but they can minimize the damage. And finally, after centuries of trying, they have human partners who understand what they're trying to do. I die peacefully in my sleep on a cold December night in 1991, exactly 24 years after the Alver Bridge collapse. My last entry in the radio log reads, "All stations clear. The watch continues." Dr. Chen finds my body the next morning when I don't answer her weekly check-in call. On my desk, she discovers a final letter addressed to her and all the other humans who learned to listen to monster warnings. The letter is simple. The creatures were never our enemies. They were always our guardians. We just had to learn how to see past the fear to understand the love. That night, rangers across 12 states report the same phenomenon. Glowing red eyes appear in the sky above forests, mountains, and rivers throughout Appalachia. But instead of landing or making contact, the creatures simply circle once and fly away toward the deeper wilderness. Dr. Chen understands what it means. They're saying goodbye to the first human who truly understood them, the first person who looked at a monster and saw a protector. But the work continues. Every year, new people are chosen to receive visions and warnings. The network grows stronger, the communication clearer, the cooperation deeper. And somewhere in the mountains of West Virginia, in the forests where Cherokee spirits still walk and ancient secrets wait in abandoned bunkers, the descendants of the first Mothman continue their eternal vigil. Watching, waiting, warning, still trying to save a species that shoots at monsters instead of listening to them. But now they have allies. Humans who understand that the most frightening guardian is sometimes the most effective one. The Mothman's prophecy wasn't about disasters coming. It was about hope surviving, even in the darkest places, even in the most frightening forms. And that prophecy continues to this day,